Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Left the Village After Forbidden Scroll Incident. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
When her brother glared at her, Tamari experienced that all. Too familiar chill. She gave him a comforting smile, hoping he would believe her when she said, nothing, just spacing out, I guess. She was fairly certain at this point in her life that her brother was incapable of reading minds, but one could never be too sure around him. Gaara simply turned away and snorted, which helped Tamari breathe a little more easily. She truly loved her brother, but he also scared the living daylights out of her, which led to a lot of potential counseling issues that she may eventually need to investigate. After a few more minutes of walking in silence, Konkuro came to a sudden halt. He called out, "Hey, Baki. Sensei," to get the others' attention. Baki had nearly bumped into Konkuro and had already stopped when he did. "What is it?" Konkuro gestured toward the horizon. "That orange thing over there, it's not a mirage or something, is it?" Following his instructions, the others were able to see the figure of what looked to be a person lying face down in the sand through the whirling sand. Tamari said, "Should we go check, Baki, Sensei?" "Why bother?" Gaara asked in an irritated tone. "It's probably just a corpse." Baki scowled. "It wouldn't do to just leave someone there if they're still alive. Tamari, Konkuro, investigate," he ordered. With a nod, the siblings departed. Gaara gazed after them before continuing on her way. When he said, "I'm not waiting for you," then, after watching his youngest pupil leave, Baki went to catch up with the others. When Tamari arrived at the Fallen, she bent over and removed the orange jacket covering its head, exposing a wild-haired young boy with green goggles over his eyes. With caution, she reached down and turned him to his back, noting that he had been there for at least an hour and that his skin was already a bright red. She overheard her brother ask, "What's the verdict?" The kunoichi felt a slight but constant pulse on the boy's neck with 2 fingers. She affirmed, "He's still alive, but he'd most likely suffering from sunstroke. We need to get him to a hospital if he's going to live." Tamari slowly removed the goggles from his eyes as she raised his head and held it in her arm. In comparison to the rest of his face, the areas surrounding his eyes were extremely pale, and the boy's cheeks seemed to have a number of odd markings that she assumed were birthmarks or something. Tamari was able to see how deep and blue the boy's eyes were when they opened. She concluded that the boy had good eyes. He whispered softly, "I see. An angel," with a tiny, silly smile on his face. Tamari blushed, then snarled when Konkuro burst out laughing. He crumpled over in agony as Tamari elbowed him in the stomach and said, "Yeah, it's sunstroke all right. He's already delusional." Baki told them, "Enough fooling around, you two. If the boy is still alive, then we need to get him back to the village. Any idea where he's from?" Tamari gave a shrug. She gave the boy a little shake to get his attention again and said, "He's not wearing a shinobi headband. Hey kid, can you tell me where you're from?" The boy appeared perplexed by the question, but then his eyes widened in terror, and Tamari realized that he was no longer in her arms and was crouching several feet away from her and the others in an animalistic position. Surprised, the 3 Suna shinobi stiffened. He bared his teeth and slurred, "Can T go back at them? W. Won't. Let." Before collapsing once more. Before Baki relaxed, the group remained motionless for a few seconds, waiting to see if anything else would happen. Calmly, he approached and gathered the boy in his arms. "Let's go," he concluded. The others gave a nod and trailed close behind, with the village of Kusagakure already emerging from behind the sand dunes. Uzumaki Naruto spent the next few hours in a haze. As his body continued to lose battles against unconsciousness, he was only able to catch glimpses of what was happening during that period. He could feel someone carrying him for a while, but he was unable to focus his eyes long enough to identify the person. Later, he was surrounded by a number of white-clad individuals in a tiny room. He tried to ask a few times what was going on and where he was, but nobody seemed to understand him. He had once attempted to get up and run, but was still lost in confusion. He would have been successful, but as soon as he sat up, a wave of pain shot through his body, sending him into another blackout. His body would occasionally feel like it was on fire while he was awake, but then it would cool down and he would feel as though he had been immersed in water. The white people started wrapping him in some sort of cloth after a number of pain-relieving procedures. After a final, abrupt jolt of pain in his arm, they put him on something soft, probably a bed, and he was out once more. Heatstroke, 2nd degree burns over half of his body, 1st degree over the rest, disorientation and multiple bouts of unconsciousness brought on by lack of sleep, food and water. Quite frankly, Baki-san, I can't see how the boy is even alive, much less in such stable condition. Baki stroked his chin thoughtfully and nodded. Any clues as to where he might be from? The young nurse gave a headshake. Nothing, sir, although. Although? He asked directly. The woman spoke in a low voice after taking a quick look around the room as if she were scared to say anything more. While cooling the boy's body, we discovered unusual markings on his stomach. It's not like anything that any one of us had ever seen, so there's no telling what it really is. The Junin scowled. I see. By any chance, is he alert enough to answer a few questions? We gave him a light pain killer a few hours ago and he's been sleeping since, she told him. I can take you to his room, if you want. Tamari and Konkuro entered the hospital as the front doors opened as they were leaving the front desk. Konkuro muttered sourly, I still don't see what the big deal is. Tamari frowned as she turned to face him. Are you saying you're not even the least bit curious? We found a half-dead person out alone in the desert and you're not interested one bit about him? In all honesty, he asked, should I be? It's not like I know him or anything. Then go home, Tamari stated bluntly. And be alone with Gaara when he's in one of his moods, are you insane? Then quit bitching and come on. The two siblings went up to the third floor and went into one of the rooms after following their teacher and the nurse. They quickly discovered that the boy was, in fact, extremely vigilant. The boy yelled, hey you bastards! What the hell's going on here, huh? If his bandaged arms and legs hadn't been strapped to the sides of his bed, he probably would have been flailing them in rage. His tirade ended with him blowing them a raspberry. If you're trying to get me to talk, you're wasting your time. I won't say a thing no matter how much more you torture me, so there, he said. The four individuals in the doorway blinked together. I hate him already, said Konkuro. Calmly approaching the bedside, the nurse opened the top drawer of a cabinet that was next to it. The boy literally freaked out when she produced a tiny scalpel. Ah, I was just kidding. Don't torture me, I don't know anything, really, please have mercy, I'm fragile. Tamari was starting to think the same thing her brother did about the boy. If he hadn't been so damn loud, she might have found him funny. Please relax, boy, the nurse said. I'm only here to change your bandages, and please keep your voice down, there are other patients in this hospital, you know? When her words seemed to catch up with him, the blonde appeared ready to start yelling once more, hospital. That's right. Then, you're not here to torture me? The woman reassured him, no, sir, Konkuro asked, can I do it? Before Tamari gave him a light shin kick. Baki shifted to a chair on the other side of the bed, ignoring the compromise between the two siblings. Now then, boy, he began, grabbing the boy's attention while the nurse began slicing through the bandages covering his arm. If you don't mind, there are a few questions that we need answered. The boy furrowed his brows suspiciously. Why should I have to tell you anything? I don't even know you, and I don't know where I am or anything. Why should I trust you? Baki inhaled deeply and reminded himself that the boy had a valid reason for being a bit stiff. Very well, I suppose I can answer a few of your questions first, then. While the boy watched carefully as the nurse continued to remove his bandages, Tamari and Konkuro walked forward, a little more eager than before for some answers. These two, he said, gesturing to the siblings, you may call me Baki, are a part of my genin team, Konkuro and Tamari. You are currently in a hospital in Kusagakure. My team and I found you unconscious in the desert several hours ago. You were suffering from a severe heat stroke, so we brought you here for treatment. Now until you answer a few of our questions, I'm afraid that's all I'm able to tell you. So. The boy remained silent as he turned his gaze to the ground and then sighed wearily. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Was from Konoha. Baki inquired, are you a shinobi? Well, not really. I mean, I want to be one, but I kept having bad luck with passing the genin exams. Baki considered that, although he wasn't a ninja if he had prior training. I've got a question, Konkuro said. What kind of idiot wanders around in a desert in the middle of the day? Especially while wearing those thick and very ugly clothes? Naruto used his free hand to point and glare menacingly. Shut up, at least I don't wear makeup. In order to prevent her brother from throttling the boy, Tamari choked back a laugh and grabbed the back of his shirt. This is ritual face paint, you loudmouthed midget. Who are you calling a midget? Naruto yelled, attempting to get to his feet in spite of his limitations. And I still say it looks like makeup. I'll have you know that there are very important meanings behind wearing this paint. Ahem. Baki was looking more than a little irritated as the two boys turned back to face him. Kankuro muttered, "Sorry, sensei," while Naruto was content to merely smile and scratch the back of his head in shame. It went on, "Now Uzumaki Naruto, the Junin. I believe that once you're sufficiently healed, you'll be able to return to Konoha." No. The intensity of Naruto's outburst made everyone shudder. He bowed his head and gazed at his bed's white linens. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's just that I can't go back, ever." The pain and sadness emanating from the blonde were perceptible to Tamari, her team, and even the nurse. She said, "You were exiled," with caution. His face grew even more sullen. I'd rather not talk about it, if you don't mind." Tamari nodded in comprehension, but she was secretly becoming even more interested in the boy in front of her. In a sense, there was something about him that drew her attention. There seemed to be something familiar about him, but she was unable to identify what it might be. Once more, Baki cleared his throat. "In that case, Naruto, you can take up refuge here in Suna for the time being. However, Suna and Konoha are joined through a mutual treaty, and if anyone were to come looking for you from Konoha, just know that there wouldn't be anything we could do for you, as it could violate the treaty." Naruto was shocked as he looked up at the man, "And since you're still a ninja.in training, perhaps we can work things out with the Kage to let you take our genin tests once you recover. We've been running a little low." Before he could finish, Naruto threw himself from the bed, destroying the straps holding him in place and frightening the nurse who was attempting to reapply his bandages. He then clamped his arms around the Junin's waist. His eyes threatened to well up with tears as he asked, "Do you mean it? I can still become a ninja?" "Yes," Baki replied as coolly as he could, "but only if you let go of me right this second." Naruto immediately started to bounce around the room, singing, "Gonna be a ninja," while swinging his arms, kicking his feet, and carelessly toppling random objects. "Going to be a ninja," at the very top of his lungs. The nurse ordered, "Uzumaki-san, stop that immediately," but Naruto didn't even hear her. She turned to Kankuro and Tamari in a panic. "Please stop him, he's not in any condition to be up, and the other patients, and—" "Oh, let me," Kankuro pleaded, raising his hand in the air as if he were a pupil pleading for the teacher to call on him. With a sigh, Tamari grabbed her fan. "Don't waste your energy, I'll do it." However, the puppeteer attempted to object. "Who is the big sister in this group?" she inquired. Kankuro mumbled, "You are," with his arms crossed in a pout. Because he was too busy celebrating, Naruto didn't notice the danger until it struck him squarely on the head, knocking him to the ground. Before he could gather himself, his hair pulled him back to his feet, and he saw Tamari's teal eyes. "Why did you do that?" He rubbed the tiny pimple that was growing on his head and whimpered. The kunoichi firmly replied, "Because, you idiot, you almost died of sunstroke not even 6 hours ago. You realize that you could still die if you continue to behave in this manner? But I'm excited. And I'm glad for you, but wait and be excited after you're healed, and get back into bed and rest now." "But, bed," she commanded, pointing a finger toward the object in question. "Man, she's scarier than Sakura-chan." Naruto sulked back to the bed and pulled the covers up past his nose, like a puppy who had just received a reprimand from its master. "What a pain, man." After everything had calmed down again, the three of them left the hospital, and Baki went off on his own, leaving Tamari by herself to hear her brother gripe. "We should have just listened to Gaara in the first place," Kankuro growled. Her reprimand was, "Oh, be nice. Sure, he's loud, but I think you're overreacting a little," she said. Kankuro sneered as he cast a sidelong glance at her, saying, "Well, of course you would think that, Angel." Tamari blushed uncontrollably. "Stop talking. He most likely doesn't even realize he said that while he was half dead. It doesn't really matter." "So, how would you describe the blush?" "I'm not blushing," unconsciously turning redder, she yelled. The puppet master laughed, "Whatever," and Tamari became silently enraged. Praying to themselves that Gaara wouldn't be upset about spending so much time alone at home, they continued walking for a few more blocks. "Oh, and Kankuro. Tamari, what precisely is the unique significance of that paint of yours?" "Shut up, Tamari. What exactly are you asking of me, Baki?" The big man inhaled deeply while maintaining a bowed head. "This boy that was found yesterday, I would like to test his abilities as a shinobi. Should he pass my expectations, I humbly ask you to make him a ninja of Suna under my command, Kage-sama." All but the Kage's eyes were completely hidden, making it nearly impossible to judge his expression, but Baki could tell the man was suspicious simply by the narrowing of those eyes. And what makes this particular boy so special that I should allow such a thing? This boy is an outsider, someone we know nothing about. Who's to say that he's not a spy? Baki grinned as he recalled his earlier encounter with the unruly child in the hospital. He is the kind of person that no sane village would send on an espionage mission. It is uncertain as of now, sir, but it seems as thought the boy left his village in a great hurry. My team and I found him passed out in the middle of the desert with no additional food, clothing, or provisions of any sort. It is our belief that the boy may have been exiled. However, there could be another possibility. The Kage arched an invisible eyebrow, and that would be. I trust you know the tale of the monster Kyuubi no Yoko? Baki responded. The Yondaime was taken aback by the sudden question, but he got over it and nodded. It was a demon fox of near immeasurable power whom the Yondaime of Konoha sacrificed himself to seal away within the body of an infant 12 years ago. What relevance does that carry here? The Kage's eyes narrowed even more when Baki remained silent. He insisted, you can't be thinking that he is that child? Again, I can't be certain yet, Kage. Sama, Baki acknowledged. But while at the hospital, an attendant informed me that they discovered markings on the boy's stomach which were unnatural looking. I haven't had the opportunity to see it myself yet, but there is still the possibility that those markings are the seal that binds the Kyuubi. This statement appeared to surprise the Yondaime. Baki went on, what I saw today, sir, in a quieter tone. In the desert. I'm positive of it. The boy was on the brink of unconsciousness, but for just the briefest of moments, he seemed to change, and I felt an evil force, a bloodlust the likes of which I've only felt in the past from Gaara. The Kage's eyes hardened abruptly. You want to unleash another monster like Gaara on our village? Are you a fool? Baki gave a headshake. No sir, please don't misunderstand. This boy seems to be stable, much more controlled than Gaara. I believe that with proper guidance and training, the boy can become a great asset to the land of Suna. It could be possible that he will surpass the abilities of Gaara himself. The Yondaime's body froze slightly with a sense of dread. Though the idea of another demon weighed heavily on his chest, he was pulled in a different direction by the possibility that they could succeed with this Uzumaki boy where they had failed with Gaara. Baki was anxiously awaiting the Kage's next words, at last, following a protracted period of silence. Test him. If he is deemed worthy, then I shall leave him to you. But heed my word now, Baki. If something goes wrong, I shall personally end your life. The Junin lowered his head once more and disappeared. Tamari was already bored at the middle of the morning. These days, it appeared to be the case more often than not. She was generally able to keep herself occupied with training and missions, but she frequently found herself at a loss for what to do when the former was lacking and the rest of the team wasn't present for the latter. Tamari was sure she needed a new pastime. Botany was all right, but she could only be interested in him for so long. On the other hand, Kankuro could go out and look for new parts and adapters that fit him, or he could spend hours each day playing with his puppets. Gaara also had his things to do, but it also appeared that he could be perfectly happy just sitting on the roof all day and night. She had long recognized that she was different from the majority of the village's girls. Tamari never really felt the need for the local clothing and beauty shops, where kunoichi and village girls were constantly present. I don't mean to brag, but judging by the passing boy's occasional looks, she looked great in anything she wore, makeup or not. Since it had been years since she had interacted with any boys of her age, none of that really mattered anyhow. All of the male shinobi around her age were pitifully weak, and the one quality Tamari sought in a potential boyfriend was that he be able to keep up with her, both mentally and physically, even if there were some men who were man enough to ignore the fact that she was Gaara's sister. However, this kind of thinking only made her feel depressed. With a sigh, she got out of bed and left the room. She located the staircase that led to their house's roof. Unsurprised, she opened the door to see Gaara sitting on the roof's ledge, gazing at nothing in particular as she looked out over the village. She walked to stand beside him and called, Gaara. The redhead gave her a flat stare as she turned rigidly. His question was direct. What do you want? She squatted a few feet away from him and said nonchalantly, I just wanted to let you know that I'm going out for a while, so you'll have the house to yourself until me or Kankuro get back. The vacant gaze remained unwavering. Fine. Tamari slumped in her thoughts. Since she was 8 years old, she had been attempting to persuade Gaara to open up to her more and come out of his shell, believing that perhaps this would give his life some stability. But years later, it appeared that there was no chance of such a thing happening. Still, she made the decision to try again. She inquired, have you eaten yet? I can bring something back for you. Gaara resumed staring out into space. Nothing sweet. Tamari grinned. Sure thing. She got back up and, on a whim, reached over to gently tousle the boy's hair. Unfortunately, he flinched at the unexpected contact, and a thin layer of sand started to form around his body. Tamari instantly withdrew her hand as if a cobra had nearly bitten it. Her big sister, amiable mask fell away, to be replaced by one of fear and sadness. "Sorry," she said in a whisper. Without waiting for an answer, she leapt from the roof and didn't turn around until she was more than a block away. I'll be back later, okay?" she said. Gaara continued to ignore her. Tamari spent some time just aimlessly wandering the village's streets at first. She finally arrived at a section of town that served chilled soba, which the locals in the desert town loved. She stopped by the stand, ordered a bowl, and then got Gaara a special one. Gaara, regrettably, had some expensive tastes, but it cost her the majority of the pocket money she had brought. She always said it was better safe than sorry. She happened to remember the boy from yesterday at Uzumaki Naruto, if her memory serves me correctly, as she passed the hospital on her way back to the house. She looked up at the building in front of her, then down at the little wrapped box she was holding, and then down again. She concluded, what the heck, 10 minutes shouldn't hurt. I just hope Gaara isn't starving. An eyeball was visible peering through a door that had cracked open. It glanced up, down, left, and right before concluding that there were no ambushes awaiting it on the opposite side. A boy wearing a lot of bandages crept into the hallway as the door creaked open even more slowly. He heard someone approaching before he had taken 2 steps. In an instant, he was squatting beneath a metal gurney, a long white sheet drawn down to hide him from the oncoming figure. Before he realized that the person was now pushing the gurney down the hallway, it had seemed like a smart idea. In order to avoid being exposed, he had to crawl on his hands and knees with it. Being so heavily wrapped made it difficult to move in this manner, but given the gurney's frequent zigzags and zaves through the different hallways, he had to assume that the person either didn't know where he was going or already knew he was under there and was punishing him for leaving his room. He carefully lifted the sheet and looked out when it finally stopped and the man started to leave. Now that everything appeared to be clear once more, he just needed to locate the exit and determine his location within the building before anyone noticed that his room was empty. With his meager victory, Uzumaki Naruto smiled. Additionally, it was said that he was not a good ninja. Well, screw them. Even though he was stranded and alone in the middle of enemy territory, he was already essentially at liberty. Now there would be no stopping him. Going somewhere. He stopped. Somehow, that voice sounded familiar. He spun around very slowly. His first thought was, oh crap, before he could stop himself. Standing right in front of him, with her arms crossed, her foot tapping, and a rather unfriendly glint in her eye, was that frightful girl from the previous evening. Bad. Well? The concerned girl asked. Naruto took a deep swallow. Bathroom? The skepticism with which the girl raised an eyebrow made Naruto shudder. It was crazy. Despite only having known her for an hour, the girl already frightened him more than any girl he had ever known at home. Of course, he hadn't really known any of the other girls except Sakura anyway. Her tone was far too casual to be genuine as she asked, "You wouldn't be planning on leaving the hospital before you're completely healed, would you?" He emphasized, "But I am healed," as though to demonstrate it. "I'm feeling fine. I'm a really fast healer." Her response was, "Not that fast, you're not." She put her hand firmly on his shoulder and said, "You were 10 feet from death's door when we found you yesterday, and let me tell you something, kid. I'm not always known for doing favors for people. So when I actually go out of my way to help somebody, that somebody better damn well appreciate what I've done for them and not do something stupid that might make me regret helping them in the first place. Do you understand?" Naruto gave a firm nod. Absolutely, Tamari, was it?" The girl nodded, appearing a little taken aback that he had remembered her name. "I really appreciate you helping me and everything, but I swear I'm all better now. And I have to go train more so I can still become a genin, because if I don't, then..." "Naruto," Tamari said coolly, "do you see this large fan on my back?" The question was strange, and Naruto blinked. He took a close look at the long black fan. "What about it? How much do you suppose it weighs?" He guessed, 50 pounds. 55 actually, but close enough, she replied. "Now then, do you have any idea what I might possibly use this big, heavy fan for?" It had nothing to do with the hospital's lack of air conditioning, but Naruto was starting to perspire. Keeping yourself cool?" "Actually," Tamari said, reaching into her pocket and taking out a much smaller paper fan. "That's what I use this fan for. And if you don't get back in that room and stay there until the doctors tell you otherwise, I'm going to use this fan to make sure you stay there even longer. Alright?" Naruto reluctantly followed the fellow blonde back to his room, Having no choice but to surrender, she placed Gaara's box of noodles on the bedside table and sat down next to it after he had returned to his bed. "Good boy," she remarked, giving him a gentle head pat. He gave her a sour look in return, which made her laugh a little. "I'm not a dog, you know," he complained. "And what are you doing back here anyway?" Tamari crossed her arms and legs, leaned back in her chair, and sniffed. "I was in the area and thought I'd see how you were." "Okay. It's not like you'll end up with any real visitors out here in Suna, right?" Tamari felt that she must have hit a tender spot for Naruto, who grimaced and looked away. But she said nothing, and there was an awkward silence for the duration. "So then, tell me about yourself." With a look of disbelief on his face, Naruto turned back to her. "Nani?" She said, "Tell me about yourself," again. His astonishment increased. "You want to know about me?" "Why not?" she asked. "Considering the circumstances of how we met, can you blame me for being a little interested in you?" Tamari was already starting to form a pretty good impression of the boy, of course. She assumed that he was either an outcast or someone that no one wanted to hang out with based solely on his responses to things sheer Baki Sensei had said to him. All she wanted to know now was why. A quiet tea. "There's really not that much to tell," he said. "Not much to tell, or not much that you want to tell?" she asked. Naruto's hands gripped his bed linens more tightly. He didn't want to have to deal with this. He didn't want to remember, and talking like this was making him do just that. He simply wanted to forget about Sakura, Chan, Iruka, Sensei, the old man, that jerk Sasuke, Konoha, and everyone else. All he wanted was to be able to move on from the past and forget about it, but if he had to constantly relive those unpleasant memories whenever he met someone new who inquired about his life, he would never be able to do so. In an attempt to sound pleading, he said, "Can we please just talk about something else?" After examining his face for a few moments, Tamari let out a sigh. "All right, fine. But I do want to know just one thing first." Naruto stiffened. "What's that?" The girl looked right into his eyes. "Were you actually exiled for some reason, or did you just decide to leave?" "I don't really care about the reasons behind it, but if you're some sort of criminal or something, then I might have something to say about that." "So?" The blonde boy was clenching the sheets so tightly that his knuckles hurt. I wasn't exiled. I just couldn't stay there anymore." At that point, Tamari realized where she had previously been reminded of this boy. "It must have been hard for you, being all alone in a place where no one cares about you." Before he understood what she had just said, Naruto appeared to nod. His eyes then widened in surprise. "Wh. I mean, how'd?" She smiled at him sorrowfully. "I've seen that expression on your face more times in my life than I can count. If there's one thing I'm an expert at, it's spotting the symptoms of someone who's gone through life unloved. You've got all the signs and then some." Naruto was utterly taken aback. "You mean, you?" Tamari flicked her wrist to dismiss him. "It's not me, if that's what you're thinking. But enough about that, you answered my question, so we can change the subject now, right?" Although he could acknowledge that he was occasionally a bit dim, Naruto wasn't so thick that he couldn't tell that Tamari was done talking about the matter, so he decided to ignore it for the time being. He said, "So that brother of yours, does he buy his own make-up or just use yours?" While stretching his face into his trademark fox-faced grin. Tamari was so taken aback that she almost toppled over her chair. As far as she could recall, nobody in Suna ever made any remarks about Konkuro's face paint, probably because they were astute and worried about the consequences of doing so. Nevertheless, she couldn't resist laughing. "You're something else, kid. Though with that kind of talk you probably won't last long out here in Suna." Naruto threw back his sheets and got to his feet confidently. "That's what you think? I'll be the greatest ninja that Suna has ever seen. Just you wait and see." The declaration caused Tamari to snort and raise her eyebrows. "Cocky, are we? Suna's not known for its pushovers, you know?" In the air, Naruto flung his fist. "So what? Bring him on. I swore that I'd one day become the greatest Hokage ever and earn the admiration of everyone in the village. And I never break my vow, that's my nindo." The direct statement, "But you're not in Konoha anymore," came from Tamari. The kunoichi didn't even have time to consider saying sorry before he was standing straight up with his arm outstretched once more after Naruto instantly lost his confidence. "Then I'll just have to alter my vow, and become the greatest Kage in all of history, instead." His eyes were now starting to fill with stars. He closed his eyes and stroked his chin thoughtfully, nodding in agreement with his own wisdom. "And then I can go back to Konoha and tell those villagers, haha. I bet you wish you hadn't been such big assholes to me now, huh?" and then they'll all say, "Oh Naruto, how could we have been so foolish? Please forgive our stupidity and be our new Hokage." And then I'll become the first ever Kage. Hokage. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. There was nothing Tamari could do but gaze. Had she just made a comparison between Gaara and this guy? She must have been completely insane. With a smile on his face akin to a child discovering his Christmas presents before they had even been wrapped, Naruto collapsed back onto his bed. "So what's your goal, Tamari?" Ni-chan. Once more, Tamari was caught entirely unprepared. She wasn't sure if it was the question or the way he had called her, but she mentally noted that she should not be so casual around him. Slowly, she said, "Well, now that you mention it, the statement, 'I guess I haven't thought much about anything long-term,' was accurate." Her only objective was to ensure that she became a Junin or perhaps an Anbu before either of her brothers. She put her hand on her chin and stared thoughtfully at the floor, confronted by this new dilemma. Naruto was patiently waiting for her to finish speaking when he became aware of the room's food odor. The smell emanating from the little box Tamari had brought was somewhat familiar. Was that what she had brought him? He had hardly been able to eat the food the nurses had brought him earlier, so if that's the case, it would have been a minor blessing. And if the odor was indeed what he thought it was, let him be right, please. Tamari gave a frustrated growl. It had dawned on her for the first time in her life that she had no idea what she wanted to do with her life besides being a ninja. Now this was gloomy, damn it. Ew, she heard. This ramen is all cold and weird looking, gross. She scowled. She cried out in wide-eyed horror, "That's not ramen, Baka. It's so. Oh my god, you're eating Gaara's lunch." Naruto blinked while holding a bowl and chopsticks, with one noodle dangling limp from his lips. Nani? Close chapter 3. A.N. Although I'm not particularly happy with this chapter, I apologize if it seems disappointing because, as I mentioned, it was meant to be much longer. I'm not sure when I'll be able to get my computer back, but hopefully the next update will be available in a week or 10 days. I made a wild guess about Tamari's fan's weight. It's probably heavier in reality, but I'm not positive. It's probably not a stretch to assume that Naruto would also call Tamari Ni-chan, as he seems to do with practically every girl he knows who is older than him. Ayame, the ramen girl, Shizune, that anime fish girl whose name I can't remember, etc. I would especially like to thank Because I Can and LD 1449 for helping me come up with new plot twists. I also want to thank everyone else who has reviewed or added me as a favorite. Thank you so much. Additionally, here is a preview of Chapter 4 to demonstrate that Naruto and Gaara will be featured in the upcoming chapter. Have fun. In silence, the two boys gazed at each other, one sporting an apologetic smile and the other a piercing glare. "Sorry about that," Naruto said, embarrassedly massaging the back of his head. "I wasn't really looking where I was going, and I didn't see you there, so my bad, okay?" The redhead kept glaring, which made Naruto feel even more uneasy. He felt uneasy about this guy for some reason. The boy said, "Are you here to help me prove my existence?" Naruto cocked his head, perplexed. What does that mean?" Pulling the cork from the enormous gourd on his back, the boy reached up. Sabaku Q. Sand suddenly started to pour out of the gourd's mouth, and before Naruto could figure out what to do with it, the sand had already twisted itself through the air and started to encircle his body. Trying to get away, he cried, "Hey, what's happening? Let go of me." However, it was useless because the boy's evil eyes were the last thing Naruto saw before the sand engulfed his entire body. The day that Uzumaki Naruto, the fox demon carrier, left the village was 1 week ago. There had been sporadic celebrations among the villagers in the days that followed. You had to be a high-ranking Junin to see the atmosphere of joy that had risen from all over Konoha, but it was never anything too overt. After being able to live in peace once more, people continued to drink and laugh in bars until the wee hours of the morning. They would finally be able to enjoy life again after enduring the demon brat's antics and living in constant fear that he would go on a murderous rampage for the sake of themselves and their loved ones. In any case, this was the prevailing opinion. However, a sizable portion of the population was unable to partake in the other's joy. Firstly, the proprietor of the Ichiraku ramen stand and his daughter were already beginning to experience the onset of difficult circumstances. Even they were unaware of how wonderful Naruto had been to them, despite the fact that it had long been known that he was their best customer. They hadn't even been earning a quarter of what they had before Naruto left them. Before, there weren't many other regulars there, but now it seemed like everyone was avoiding the place completely, as though going there would somehow make the boy return. The situation with Hyuga Hinata was even worse. She was different in ways that each member of the Hyuga family could see. In their eyes, she was now a truly awful ninja, whereas previously she had been a mediocre one. Her focus was totally off, she appeared to have lost all motivation to even be a shinobi, and her sparring sessions with her sister Hanabi never lasted more than a minute. They were looking for something to blame that might be the reason, but none of them even thought about the link between the fox carrier's disappearance and her skill decline. Some people came to the conclusion that she had been assigned to the genin team. Maybe her sensei wasn't challenging her enough, or maybe her teammates were impairing her judgment in some way. Others questioned Hiashi's actions. Although the Hyuga clan was not known for being particularly loving, some of the more understanding members believed that Hiashi's excessively harsh treatment of his daughter was the reason why she had lost any trust she may have once had. The head of the Hyuga clan responded to these remarks with open contempt, saying that he had treated Hinata no differently than Hanabi and that she was doing well. If anything, Hiashi had grown even more distant from his oldest daughter over the past week. Hanabi had begun making an effort to console her because of the disappointment and contempt he had previously displayed, but no matter how hard she pressed, she was unable to get Hinata to reveal what was truly upsetting her. Similar strategies had been employed by her team with comparable outcomes. Even Kurenai was unable to help Hinata overcome her depression. The Genjutsu expert was also starting to have serious doubts about Hinata's future as a shinobi as the days passed. Iruka sat looking downcastly up at the stone faces at the base of the Hokage monument. Like he had been doing for days, he had been there for a few hours now, arriving as soon as classes ended. Both shinobi and villagers knew that he should not be bothered in such situations, so he was a little taken aback when he heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned to look at the newcomer. "Iruka," said the man. Iruka winced. It appeared to be that moment once more. He said, "Good afternoon, Hokage-sama," in a blunt manner. Standing beside Iruka, Sarutobi leaned heavily on his walking staff. He lowered himself into a seated position and groaned. Iruka started to play with one of his kunai absently, spinning it around on his finger before using it to scrape the ground. There was silence for a few minutes before Iruka lost patience. "Is there something you wanted from me, Hokage-sama?" Sarutobi blew a tiny smoke ring directly into the air after taking multiple puffs from his pipe. "You're doing it again, Iruka." "Doing what, sir?" "You know what, Iruka," the elderly man informed him. "You're blaming yourself for something that isn't your fault. Just like you did before." Driving his kunai into the cement beside him, Iruka demanded, "How can I not blame myself, Hokage-sama?" The scarred Chunin gazed at the deep fissure his weapon had made and sighed deeply. "If I had just let go of my stupid hate for what Naruto had inside of me and started acknowledging Naruto himself, this might not have happened. There were so many things that I could have done differently for him." Sarutobi gave a headshake. "There were plenty of things that all of us could have done, Iruka, including myself. But sir, nobody in this entire village really took Arashi-sama's words to heart. You see," he said. "Naruto was meant to be the hero of Konoha for being used as a sacrificial container without even given a choice. Instead, everyone who didn't outright scorn the boy simply ignored him altogether. I wasn't much different, I'm afraid." Iruka said nothing, indicating Sarutobi to go on. "I think back now. When Naruto first left that orphanage, I shouldn't have allowed him to live on his own. If I had simply taken him in myself, or possibly found someone else who would be willing to do the same, how much better would he have turned out? He could have gotten the attention and guidance that he so desperately needed." Once more, the two fell silent. Iruka asked aloud, "Isn't there anything more we can do?" Sarutobi gave a shrug. "We've already concluded that Naruto is no longer within the boundaries of the Fire Country. The odds of finding him anywhere else at this point are all but non-existent unless some word of him reaches us. We also can't forget that there are other people outside of our village who know about the Kyuubi. If someone were to find Naruto and discover what he is, well, I'm sure you don't need to be told what could happen then. But can't we?" To silence him, Sarutobi raised his hand. "However, there is one thing that we can do." The Sandame stopped once more and took a long drag from his pipe. Though he remained silent, Iruka had the impression that the Hokage was intentionally torturing him. "Currently, we are bound through a signed peace treaty with Kusagakure in the Land of Wind. The chances that Naruto is actually in the Wind Country are slim, but if I were to send an envoy to the Yondaime Kage, perhaps he will agree to send a search team for us." Sarutobi hated to finish his thoughts out loud, but the expression of renewed hope on Iruka's face was enough. It was impossible to predict whether Naruto would be in Suna, what condition he would be in, or even whether he would still be alive if he had ended up in the Land of Wind. Given their shared general relationships, it was equally likely that he had found himself in the land of rain, sound, or even earth, which would have caused major issues. Additionally, he needed to come up with a compelling tale to present to the Kage, who would probably object to sending his shinobi out to look for a single missing boy unless there was a compelling reason. Sarutobi grabbed his staff, forced himself to stand again, and looked back up at the monument. "I'll send someone out at dawn tomorrow." Iruka said, "Thank you, Hokage sama," and bowed deeply in appreciation. It made the Hokage laugh. "Iruka, you give the impression that I'm just doing this because you want me to. I can't speak for everyone else, but I genuinely feel that this past week has been far too quiet around here." After nodding, Iruka said, "I agree, Hokage sama. You are a fool. Are you attempting to murder me?" Tamari angrily shook Naruto by the front of his orange jacket as she yelled in manic hysteria. "I have no idea what you're talking about." With every forward snap of his neck, Naruto screamed, ejecting one word at a time. Tamari held the boy tightly even after she calmed down enough to stop shaking him. "That soba you ate was lunch for my brother, Gaara." She shuddered at the thought of what he might do. "I told him that I would bring food home for him, and if I don't, he's going to." Naruto tried in vain to break away from her, and to be honest, he was at a loss now. He had begun to believe that the girl was a decent person to be around, but now she appeared as though she was prepared to throw him out a window, which worried him even more because his room was windowless. Don't you think you're overreact? I am not exaggerating," she yelled. "When it comes to Gaara, there's no such thing as overreacting. His best traits are his cruelty, ruthlessness, and bloodthirstiness." She shook him roughly a few more times and said, "Why did you have to eat it? I don't even have enough money with me to buy him anything else." "I apologize, to be honest, I thought it was for me." "What makes you believe that?" Tamari asked, appearing somewhat delirious. "Well, you brought it here and set it down next to me and it smelled really good," Naruto said, putting his index fingers together as if to pout. With a powerful sigh of desperation, Tamari threw him to the ground, collapsed onto the bed, and buried her face in a pillow. Naruto briefly considered running while she was not looking, but decided against it because, even though she was frightening and perhaps a little unstable, he couldn't just leave her in such an upset state. Just to be safe. Tamari wanted to cry, and she probably would have, but for pride and the fact that she had never cried in public before. But how could she tell the boy that she might be in danger over something that would seem so trivial to someone who didn't know Gaara? For someone like Tamari, there were only a few basic rules to follow. Don't suck Gaara, and if you do, try your hardest to make things right. Gaara was going to be furious because she had promised him food and now she had none, and she couldn't afford to buy him anything else, which wouldn't help the situation. Tamari was in a bad spot. Unless, you know, Tamari. Nichan, I'm pretty sure it's not as bad as you think, she said, feeling the bed shift as Naruto took a seat beside her. Even though I don't have a brother, I doubt I would be so upset if he allowed someone to eat my lunch. Perhaps I would have beaten him up if it had been my limited edition premium blend ramen, which I had been reserving for special occasions, Buddha. Though it was cruel and not something she particularly wanted to do, Tamari had never really been listening to him in the first place, simply staring at him while she thought through her idea. As the old shinobi saying goes, there are a lot of times when you must do things you don't want to do if you hope to survive, and Tamari truly wanted to live. To think that this would make him so angry, you know? Besides, if you just tell him it was a misunderstanding, he'll understand, right? Naruto went on, utterly oblivious to Tamari's lack of hearing. Tamari said bluntly, maybe, but she had another plan than to tell Gaara what had happened. Oh, Naruto blinked. She nodded, yep, and said, I'll have you tell him instead. Rubbing his chin, Naruto said, well, I suppose that's a what? Why not? After all, it was you who ate it without asking. But why you said he was cruel, ruthless, and unstable. Naruto started to move away from her until he slipped off the bed and then slid back until his back was against the wall. And bloodthirsty, pointed out Tamari. If he's that bad, why are you attempting to force me to tell him? He inquired. I guess you're better than me, Tamari shrugged. Besides, you keep forgetting that you are to blame. Why should I bear the responsibility for you? Watching the blonde grab for her fan, Naruto swallowed. But you're his sister. If you do it, he will treat you more kindly. That would be the day, Tamari snorted. I apologize, Naruto, but I'm at a loss for what to do. Either you accept your penalty like a man, or my brother becomes irritable and terrorizes and destroys Suna and me. Do I have to tie you and put you at my brother's feet, or will you voluntarily do the right thing now? Naruto broke out in a cold sweat. May I just say something? What is it, even though it won't make me change my mind? I have money. What? I don't. With trembling hands, Naruto produced a tiny green wallet in the shape of a frog and held it up to Tamari, saying, you can have some if you want. Tamari remained silent for a moment, and then before he knew it, the money pouch had been torn from Naruto's hand and he was once more being lifted off the ground by his shirt. You're an idiot. Why didn't you bring that up earlier? Damn it, I was having a conniption. It took a moment for the blonde boy to realize that Tamari was now hugging him, seemingly out of sheer relief, after he tried to apologize and felt his body shift into a different position. She exclaimed, "This is fantastic. No one has to die and Gaara won't even need to know." Naruto squeaked out, "Ga." Too tight, just before vanishing in a cloud of smoke, leaving Tamari grasping at nothing. What? After searching the room for Naruto and failing to find him, the kunoichi gazed in disbelief at the spot where he had just been standing before noticing something even more unsettling. He was gone, and so was the money pouch. The real Uzumaki Naruto, meanwhile, had nearly arrived at the hospital's front door. He thought, thanked Kami for Kage Bunshin. He had felt the need to leave when Tamari had first started to freak out over him eating the soba, so as soon as she had put her face in that pillow and diverted her attention from him, he had made a clone and quietly slipped out the door. He'd stayed just outside, of course, so he could still hear the direction of the conversation, and he would have gone back inside if she had calmed down again, but when he heard her discussing giving him to her unstable brother, he thought it was time for a calculated escape, and it didn't matter what happened next, as long as he was out of sight before she noticed. He whispered, "Man, just when I think I have people figured out," and pushed the door open. He had barely stepped outside when a frightful roar shuddered through the building, sounding a lot like someone yelling, "You! Zoo! M.A. Key!" With a shudder, the foxboy said, "Damn." Kankuro was walking slowly down the sandy Suna road with a big sack slung over his shoulder and a small white box in his hand. He was having a great day. He had found the perfect piece to upgrade Karasu. He had avoided having to deal with his bossy sister and his deranged brother all day, and he had made 4 kids run away in terror simply by saying, "Boo," and approaching them. It was a good life. He took a stick of yakitori out of his box and started eating it contentedly, totally unaware of anything else. He was so unaware, in fact, that he barely got out of the way before an orange blur sped past him, and when Kankuro looked back, he saw the blur jump up onto a rooftop and continue on his way as if he were being pursued by hellhounds. "Little punk," he said. "You just feel lucky that you caught me in a real good mood, or I'd." The world would never know what Kankuro did, though, because a second person ran by at that precise moment, and he was unable to move in time, causing the two to collide. Kankuro snarled and sat up, saying, "Damn it all. No one looks where they're going these days. I'm in the correct frame of mind to." Tamari. The sister of the puppet master also sat up and gave herself a little rub on the lower back. "I'm sorry, Kankuro, but did you see that boy pass by here?" Kankuro blinked, perplexed. "Please, could we be less specific?" "You know, Naruto, the one from yesterday," Tamari said with a frown. She trailed off, "I can't let him." She opened the top of a small white box that was resting on the ground next to her, and her eyes widened. A present from heaven. She sobbed, grabbed the box, and fled, not even considering whether or not she would come across Naruto again. "Hey, Tamari, that's my lunch." As he gathered his belongings and pursued, Kankuro called. As he ran from rooftop to rooftop, Naruto thought about his current predicament and decided that his best course of action was to leave Suna before he attracted any more negative attention to himself. He didn't know if Tamari was still after him, but he didn't want to look to see. It was unfortunate, though, because Tamari and her brother, who wore makeup, and their sensei hadn't seemed so bad yesterday, but if they were to find out what he was. His decision was clear. He would go and attempt to start over in a new village, perhaps a typical one where he wouldn't have to worry about ninja pursuing him, develop his own training regimen, grow extremely strong, and be able to protect the village from intruders and dangerous animals. Yes, that might work. He might not be Hokage, but at least he would be respected and loved. He had to figure out how to get out of here, though, because the village was in the middle of the desert, and he had nearly died the last time he tried to travel through it. Perhaps he could find a guide, or a big water tank he could carry with him. He took the chance to glance over his shoulder and saw that the fan wielder had vanished, which gave him a sense of relief because at least he could now devise a plan without interference. He turned back to face forward just as he had kicked off from another building, and his warning senses pricked up when he noticed that someone was standing on the roof he was heading toward. In fact, at this angle, he was going to land on top of him. "Hey, be careful," he yelled at the boy with the red hair. Naruto panicked and started thrashing his arms and legs in a futile attempt to alter his mid-flight course, but the boy didn't move or even appear to have heard him. When he realized it wasn't working, he closed his eyes and waited for the impact. When the impact finally came, it wasn't at all how Naruto had imagined it would feel. Rather than hitting a human's relatively soft body, he felt a much more forceful contact, as if he had leapt into a cement wall or something, and the force of the impact dizzied the blonde, sending him landing hard on his rear end. To clear his vision, he shook his head slightly, but he was still looking at something strange, to put it mildly. Sand? He asked incredulously, but it was true that there appeared to be a small wall of sand in front of him that had not existed a moment before. He reached forward to touch it hesitantly, but he withdrew as the wall collapsed to nothing, leaving him staring up into the boy's pale face that he had nearly struck. Naruto jumped back up and rubbed his slightly sore face while he studied the boy in front of him. If the boy hadn't had such a cruel expression on his face, he might have looked a little funny. He didn't appear to have any eyebrows, but he had thick, dark rings around his eyes that made Naruto think of a panda, a raccoon, or something. In silence, the two boys gazed at each other, one sporting an apologetic smile and the other a piercing glare. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in shame and apologized, saying, "I didn't see you there and I wasn't really looking where I was going, so my bad, okay." Naruto felt even more uneasy as the redhead kept glaring at him. There was something about him that made his skin crawl. "Are you here to assist me in establishing my existence?" the boy inquired. With a bewildered tilt of his head, Naruto said, "What does that mean?" Pulling the cork from the enormous gourd on his back, the boy said, "Sabaku Q." Sand suddenly started to pour out of the gourd's mouth, and before Naruto could figure out what to do with it, the sand had already twisted itself through the air and started to encircle his body. "Hey, what's going on? Let go of me," he cried, straining to free himself. However, it was useless because the boy's evil gleam in his eyes was the last thing Naruto saw before the sand engulfed his entire body. The Kyuubi stirred as Naruto fought to escape his prison. The fox raised its head and took a deep breath. It had long since been able to ignore the foul smell of mold and decay from the sewers it was imprisoned in, but now he was being approached by a new but familiar smell. The Kyuubi let out a savage laugh that might have been mistaken for a growl. "So, you're that one," the Kyuubi said. "I see that you're still weak. I'm not having any fun here." After saying that, the Kyuubi put its head down and resumed its slumber. It would be much more fun and entertaining for Gaara if everyone in the village could witness the slaughter he was about to carry out with their own eyes. It had been nearly 3 days since he had last taken a human life in this village, and it wouldn't do to have anyone forget that he was still among them. Gaara was laughing as he slowly raised the idiot trapped in his Sabaku Q higher up into the air. The voice inside him snarled at him to hurry and kill the boy, because there was no point in making it any more suspenseful, because right now, it wanted blood more than fear. With a gleam in his eyes, Gaara pushed the voice away, and he started to clench his hand into a fist. The casket of sand was now a good 50 above the rooftop, providing a good view to anyone who happened to turn their eyes to the sky. He would see the sands of Kusagakure stained red with the blood of one of its own. Sabaku. Then he stopped. There was something strange about the sand that contained his prey. Even from that height, Gaara could see that the blob of sand was getting bigger. But why? Is it possible that his victim was retaliating? The boy's spine tingled with pleasure at the thought. How long had it been since his prey had retaliated? Too long. Far too long. This was fantastic. Maybe he could finally enjoy himself. Sabaku no Gaara waited to see exactly what would happen next while lowering his hand. With Tamari humming happily to herself and Kankuro sporting a big bump that was visible even through his black hood, the two of them strolled back toward their house. "Why didn't you simply inform me that Gaara required it?" he complained. Then she shot back, "I told you it was a matter of life and death. You didn't need to use your dumb fan yet. I don't always whip out Karasu to make a point, as you can see. That's because you detest the idea of me destroying your tiny toys. Additionally, don't assume that I don't notice when you use him to pursue the children who play across the street from us. You've totally missed my point, and what I do in my spare time is my business, and you owe me lunch, too," he yelled, thrusting his hands into his pockets. Despite herself, Tamari smiled. It seemed as though the last hour of her life had never even occurred. Everything had returned to normal, which was probably for the best. Then she happened to look up as a stray cloud passed in front of the sun. "Oh shit," she cursed, and Kankuro gave her a startled look. "What's the matter?" He followed her gaze up to the sphere of sand floating high in the air as she pointed upward. He agreed, saying, "Oh shit, why already? We returned from that mission just now. He ought to be content for no more than a week." Tamari said nothing, but she was thinking the same thing. Gaara usually didn't kill again for a few days after he had killed enough, and 2 days prior, he had slaughtered nearly 20 shinobi by himself, which should have satisfied his bloodlust for at least a week, as her brother had stated. The only reason for this would have been if someone had somehow enraged or provoked Gaara. God, she hoped that wasn't it. If it was, she probably should have been more patient with his food. Was she bearing the weight of that innocent person's impending death? Tamari. Kankuro. Unsurprised, the siblings looked in the direction of the voice and saw Baki sprinting in their direction. "I take it you saw it too?" Although it was more of a statement than a question, Kankuro asked. "Do you know who it is or why Gaara is killing again so quickly?" Baki nodded. Although they both unconsciously looked down at the box in Tamari's hand, they both shook their heads. "There's nothing we can do then except wait for him to calm back down," Baki said with a distressed sigh. Tamari, who had already killed multiple times in her life, but always during missions against people who knew how to defend themselves, would almost feel sick watching Gaara do the Sumaya no, even worse things to innocent people like this. Baki and Kankuro, on the other hand, continued to focus their gaze on the floating sand. Curious, she looked back up just in time to see the sand explode, but this time, unlike every other time she had seen it, the sand had exploded outward rather than inward. She waited, not sure why, just for some indication that the carnage might be over, and what she got was a noise of curiosity and confusion from Baki and Kankuro. And what she saw after that was... "Oh. My. God," she said. "What on earth is Suna's name?" Baki insisted. That disgusting orange color," Kankuro explained, his mouth hanging open. "Don't tell me." Gaara's eyes widened in awe as orange-clad people started to fill the sky above him. 2, 8, 19, 30, 7, 70.1, and 115. And still they continued to pour out until at last he was unable to count them all. When the final clone touched down, Gaara felt like a tiny island in an ocean of orange as they landed all around him. On the roof with him, on the roofs around him, and all along the streets between them. Breathing heavily and obviously perspiring from the effort of making so many clones, one of the Narutos stepped forward and confronted Gaara, exposing his longer than normal canines. He told the Sand Nin, "I've had a lot of crap happen to me in my life, particularly in the past week. However, something along these lines. Don't think I'm going to ignore this. If you're looking for a fight, I'd be more than happy to kick your raccoon. I'd ass. I'm not sure what your issue is with me." Gaara was smiling from ear to ear, and not in a friendly way, so he was able to hide any intimidation he might have had at the challenge. "I think I'm really going to enjoy killing you," he replied. Cracking their knuckles, Naruto and all of his clones said, "Try it." For the most part, Sunagakure's residents can be described as depressed. They appeared to be just like any other community on the surface. They wouldn't appear so strange even if one were to speak casually with one of them. However, when it came down to it, Suna's entire population was a shattered, depressed, and generally gloomy group of people. Living in a village with a killer who was on the verge of psychopathy was the direct cause of this, of course. The villagers could be very outspoken about political issues, but they rarely discussed the direct cause of their unhappiness. Few Suna's commoners had much regard for the current Kage, and even fewer had any concern for the Land of Wind's daimyo. After all, the monster known as Sabaku no Gaara had been directly created by these two heads of the land. Even mentioning the boy's name was frowned upon because it was thought that he might hear you and kill you for bringing him up. Had the villagers ever given it any thought, they might have realized that Gaara only killed to protect himself from a possible assassin or when a villager enraged him by screaming and fleeing at the sight of him. Everyone agreed that it would be best to get far away when they started to notice the rising ball of sand above their heads at that precise moment. This was in case Gaara needed more than one innocent life on this particular day. Imagine the astonishment that everyone experienced when the sandy prison exploded, causing a tidal wave of orange to wash over the city. The majority found it nearly impossible to handle the additional shock of hearing the crowd of identical strangers declare a fight against the resident demon container. However, nobody even considered the possibility that this foolishly courageous stranger could succeed. "Go!" Naruto ordered his army of clones. A dozen clones lunged at Gaara, who stood cross-armed and stoic-faced, only to be easily thrown away by a brush of his sand. The fact that the clones all around him were real and not just illusions startled the redhead, though he wouldn't show it. Of course, it made no difference. He would destroy them all, 1 or 1,000, without even trying, as he had always done. As several of his attacking clones poofed out of existence, Naruto let out a frustrated growl. He scratched his head thoughtfully before snapping his fingers, saying, "How does he control sand like that? He's not even forming seals. All right, new plan. Hit him from every side at once. He can't block all of you." Once more, Gaara remained motionless as a still larger group gathered around him. He calmly lifted his right hand and gestured up with his index finger. Quickly, the sand that had been circling the ground around him rose to the surface and formed a tiny dome around his body. The clones all blinked in bewilderment. One said, "What's he doing?" Another said, "How should I know?" A third person said, "Maybe he's scared." "Yeah, he's hiding from us in there," a third person laughed confidently. Impatiently, the commanding Naruto exclaimed, "WHO cares. Break it down and show him who he's dealing with." "Right," yelled the others in response, each of them pumping their fists. The group of about 20 Narutos rushed at the sand dome, using kunai to stab, slash, kick, and punch it. However, it didn't appear to be getting dented. All at once, they exclaimed as they prepared to strike the shield with a single, coordinated blow. However, dozens of thick spikes emerged from the sand barrier just as their fists had touched it, impaling each clone multiple times and making them vanish as well. Nervous and angry at the same time, Naruto grinds his teeth. He asked himself, "Damn it, how the hell do I beat that?" But before he could think any longer, he noticed a number of ripples start to move across the sand dome's surface. As a number of fresh clones leapt to the rooftop next to him to replace the ones that had already been vanquished, he carefully ducked into a defensive crouch. Naruto had a thought as the dome trembled and rippled some more. Whispering something into his ear, he drew one of his clones closer to him. With a thumbs up, the clone leapt back off the roof. The ball of sand started shooting out like bullets in all directions as Naruto turned around, barely having time to protect himself. Villagers watching from the streets below started to flee for their lives as clones started to disappear one by one, though few managed to escape entirely unscathed. Baki, Kankuro, and Tamari were sheltered behind the open fan of the kunoichi several rooftops away. Flinching as a sand bullet sailed an inch past his left ear, Kankuro demanded, "When the hell did he learn to do that?" Baki cursed in his head. He had to soothe Gaara immediately. After hearing from the Kage, Baki couldn't afford to let Naruto die, and the longer the battle went on, the more likely it was that he would. Regretfully, it would be very difficult to persuade Gaara to stop now. How could he? As Naruto pushed himself back to his feet, his body trembled. He could still feel multiple welts developing all over his body, even though none of the sand bullets that struck him had been strong enough to draw blood. He glanced around and saw that only 3 or 4 of his shadow clones remained after almost all of them had been vanquished. What does he do? He kept thinking about it. He seems to have unintentional control over the sand, which he can use to attack or defend. As the sand swirled around his body, he glared at his opponent, who was still standing in front of him and appeared to be quite bored. "I'm not giving up just yet, though." He was told by Gaara, "You struggled much better than the others, but you are still weak. Your only use now is offering me your blood." Naruto smiled. "Think again, raccoon." Eyes. A tiny hole appeared beneath Gaara, and a hand reached through to grab him by the leg of his pants, causing his eyes to widen in shock. The clone below was immediately suffocated by the sand that was pouring through the hole. "This is it," murmured Naruto. "Do it." Each of the 2 clones by his sides took hold of his arms. They swung him backward together, then slung him forward in a sling shot motion, which increased his speed toward Gaara. "He's not even glancing at me anymore. This time, I won't let the sand stop me." The blonde yelled, "Got you," and threw his fist forward. ULPH. Gaara raised his head again and saw that he was looking into a twitching fist that was only a centimeter away from his face. The little wall of sand that had formed in front of him moved and threw his potential assailant away. When Naruto struck his 2 surviving clones, they instantly disappeared, leaving him to face Gaara alone. "Damn," he moaned. "So close." "Damn," sighed Tamari. She slid back and rested her back against her raised fan, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Too close. It was crazy. It would be much simpler to calm Naruto down again without him becoming an immediate threat to others if Gaara could just kill him quickly and get it over with. The likelihood that he would awaken increased with the length of the fight. However, she genuinely didn't want to witness Gaara murder the boy. Even though she had only just met Uzumaki Naruto yesterday, she had to acknowledge that they had developed a small bond based on their subsequent interactions. Even though it wasn't much, the fact that they had spoken a few times together was enough to elevate him in her eyes. The last thing Tamari wanted was to see Naruto die, especially at the hands of her own brother, since it had been years since she had been able to regard someone outside of her family as a friend. Unfortunately, it was just something she would apparently have to deal with as a shinobi. "What is Gaara doing?" inquired Kankuro. "He never plays with his enemies this long. Hell, he doesn't play with them at all. He could have killed the idiot 10 times over by now. If he keeps wasting time like this, he's just gonna get more anxious." Gaara silently observed as Naruto stumbled back to his feet once more. Despite his reluctance to acknowledge it, Naruto was truly at the end of his rope. There was nothing to oppose that foolish sand. He could only think of one more thing to try. He slowly lifted his hands in a seal. At that point, a courageous villager made the decision to speak up. The man yelled, "Get him! Kill that stinking demon!" The crowd continued, "Yeah, kill the damn monster for us," at the end. Everyone in the crowd recoiled in horror as Gaara gave them a death glare. On the other hand, Naruto froze in wide-eyed fear. Do they know? They even know all the way out here? How? Gaara didn't appear interested or even aware of his opponent's unexpected panic attack. He spread his sand in 2 directions and raised his arms. From Naruto's left and right, the streams of sand closed in on him as they flew outward in broad arches before turning back in. It appeared that Naruto had no plans to stay away from them. The rooftop battleground was obscured from all observers by the broad blast of sand that was sent in all directions when the 2 streams collided. Everyone watched tensely to see if the boy might have miraculously survived, but they had already started to fear the worst. The crowd let out a little gasp as the sand cloud settled. Kankuro and Tamari looked at the scene, then at one another, and then back at the scene. "What?" mumbled Tamari. Her brother finished for her, the hell? Gaara didn't appear happy. With a tone full of malice, he demanded, "What are you doing?" Baki held onto Naruto's shoulder tightly as he slowly put the shocked boy back down. The Junin stood resolutely and spoke clearly, despite his earlier concerns about inciting the redhead's wrath. "Please forgive me, Gaara," he said, "but by decree of your father, Kage Sama, I cannot allow you to kill this boy." Tamari stumbled. Decree? At the end. Incredulously, Kankuro added, "From our old man?" Anger made Gaara's face twitch. "And why should I care?" Baki approached Naruto with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Gaara, you know that I don't have the abilities to stop you from doing the things that you do, but you have to listen to reason. You can't disobey orders from the Yondaime." Unable to believe his eyes, Naruto stood silently. He hardly knew the person who had just saved his life. And the Kage himself had personally insisted that he be left alive, unless he had misheard. However, why? Everyone here would want to burn him at the stake or something if they already knew that he was inside the Kyuubi. "I implore you, Gaara," Baki went on. "Promise me that you'll refrain from trying to kill this boy." Even his sand had stopped moving on its own and was now settled on the roof, identical to the rest of the sand in the area, but Gaara remained motionless despite his glare being sharp enough to cut steel. There was a long, tense silence all around them. Nobody even dared to move for fear of attracting the sudden, enraged attention of Gaara. When the sands finally whipped back up, they slithered and retreated into the big gourd on the boy's back instead of reaching out to attack Baki and Naruto. He vowed, "I promise." Everyone, including Baki, started to release breaths they had hardly realized they had been holding. Gaara added, "To think about it," after putting the cork back into the gourd's hole. Baki scowled. At this stage, he was unable to press the matter further. Gaara could hardly have asked for more than to be at least at peace once more. Gaara glanced at Baki and Naruto one last time before turning to face the rooftop where his 2 older siblings were sitting warily. "Tamari," he yelled at them. The 2 shinobi suppressed a shudder and leapt over to join the other 3. Under her brother's glare, Tamari tried her hardest not to appear half as terrified as she actually was. "Why? Yeah, Gaara?" He simply extended his hand to her expectantly without responding. Tamari looked at the extended hand incredulously until she realized what was happening. She took out the box of yakitori and gave it to him quickly. She watched him open the box and check what was inside. He turned away from them and slowly took out a stick and started munching on it. He growled, "Don't take so long next time," and vanished back inside the house. Everyone seemed to suddenly lose their enthusiasm as soon as the boy disappeared from view. Baki wiped the perspiration from his face with his hand. Kankuro leaned back and supported himself against Karasu, and Tamari fell to her knees. The crowd started to thin out as well. returning to their regular activities or simply moving away from this specific location as things settled down. Tamari turned to Naruto with a heavy sigh. With hesitation, she questioned, you okay? I guess so, he replied, massaging some of his recently acquired bruises. What the hell, kid? Demanded Kankuro. You have the ability to create 500,000 clones of yourself, but you tell us you're not even a genin yet? I admit I don't know much about Konoha, but those exams can't possibly be that hard. Uncomfortably, Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Well, I actually learned the Kage Bunshin after I failed the exam, but... Baki ordered, Kankuro, Tamari, please leave us, there are a few things that I need to discuss with Naruto in private. With a sniff, Kankuro said, oh sure, why not? We certainly aren't in any hurry to get a few answers out of the one, and to my knowledge, only guy to ever fight with Gaara and still be able to give said answers after it was over. No siree, just go on and leave us kids in the dark. Though you know you're horribly abusing your sensei. Student relationship rights by doing this. You can ask him whatever you want when I'm finished with him, beat it. Yeah, we're going, complained the puppet master. But just remember, if you need help with the interrogation, Karasu and I are right inside. Naruto shuddered when he heard the word interrogation, but he was somewhat lifted by the fan that connected with Kankuro's head upside down. Before grabbing her stunned brother and dragging him into the house behind her, Tamari gave him one last glance. Now that he was by himself with the half-hidden faced Junin, Naruto was unable to think of what could possibly happen. Baki said, Uzumaki Naruto, first. There are several things that I feel I need to speak with you about, but before I start, I need you to promise that you will hear me out until the end before making irrational judgments. Will you do that? Naruto nodded since he could think of nothing else to do. Baki let out a mental sigh. This would be challenging. In addition to worrying about saying the right things without saying too much, he had to win Naruto's trust now or else everything might fall apart. He thought it would be best to begin with a straightforward query. Naruto, what prompted this fight between you two? The question actually seemed to embarrass the blonde boy. Well, I was running, you see. And not really looking where I was going. And I kinda ran into him. Ran into his sand, I guess. Anyway, I tried apologizing but then he said something about existing or whatever and trapped me in that sand of his, and... Baki gave a nod. I apologize on his behalf. Gaara isn't the most rational of people. Naruto felt something nagging at the back of his head. Gaara. Why did I recognize that name? Then it made sense. Wait, you mean that was Gaara? The same Gaara as Tamari's ruthless, cold-blooded, unstable brother? Baki stated plainly, there's only one Sabaku no Gaara. Naruto trembled. It makes sense why Tamari was so terrified of that man, and the idea that someone as terrifying as Tamari could be afraid of someone else frightened him to no end. Baki said, you seemed very disturbed when the villagers began shouting about monsters and demons, which took Naruto by surprise and left him unable to hide his fear. Baki no longer harbored any reservations about Naruto's potential. He was certain he was correct. The boy appeared to be ready to run at any second. Calmly, Naruto, he said, I don't want you to misunderstand. Those people were not talking about you, they were talking about Gaara. Additional confirmation, as Naruto's expression shifted to one of perplexity and perhaps relief. I know that, said Baki. Because aside from the Kage, Sama, myself, and a select few other high-ranking shinobi, there's no one else here in Suna who knows about the Kyuubi. And the bewilderment returned to fear even more quickly than before. You look terrified, Baki told him comfortably. The words, I'm not him, stumbled out of Naruto. Baki grinned a little. You're lying, Naruto. Badly. You are the one whose body holds the Kyuubi no Yoko, of that there's no doubt anymore. Shit. It is occurring once more, oh no, is there nowhere I can go where I won't have to worry? But really, you have no reason to fear me, boy. About being despised and relentlessly pursued, he blinked. What? Baki smiled at him in a way that seemed comforting. In my opinion, you keep thousands upon millions of lives safe by having the Kyuubi sealed inside your body. For that, you deserve nothing short of my utmost admiration and respect. Baki made a little bow to Naruto, who watched in utter disbelief. He tried speaking a few times before he eventually found his voice. Are you serious? Baki gave a nod. You also seem quite stable with your actions. Do you ever have trouble controlling him? He gave a headshake. Nah. I mean, I never even found out that it was inside me before. Baki concluded by saying, before you left Konoha and came here, now that was the most sensible thing to do. The boy would undoubtedly feel overpowered by such news. The final pieces of the puzzle surrounding Naruto's mystery were revealed by his actions and remarks, which also strongly implied that the boy was hated by most of Konoha. There was only one thing left to do now that everything appeared to be figured out. He reached into his vest, took out a small piece of metal and cloth, and threw it to the shocked boy. Here. Naruto gazed down at the item he was holding, a thin piece of cloth with a metal plate fastened to the middle. The plate had a crude hourglass symbol carved into it. For many long seconds, he gazed at the headband. This is a. Someone as young as you with such a mastery over Kage Bunshin is a very rare find, Baki said. Also, anyone who can hold out in a fight against Gaara more than deserves a place in our ranks. The blonde's body started to shake. Then I'm a. As of this moment, I declare you, Uzumaki Naruto, an official shinobi of Kusagakure. From this day forward, you will be a student under me. Baki's declaration finally caused the floodgate of emotions that had been building inside Naruto to burst. He leapt straight into the air with a loud cry of victory, his new hite clenched in his fist, tears of joy streaming down his face. Yada! Ninja ninja ninja! The boy leapt from one rooftop to another and back again, and Baki watched with mild amusement. Before he could even react, Naruto sprang forward and gave him a tight hug. He exclaimed, I'm really a ninja. Baki sat back up after removing the boy's arms from around his waist. Yes, Naruto. And as your new sensei, I'm hereby making a rule prohibiting you from any future physical contact with me. Wiping the last of the tears from his eyes, Naruto laughed. Sorry, but don't worry. On this Suna hite, I swear to become the greatest shinobi that the Land of Wind has ever seen. Baki sighed. At least the boy had the right kind of enthusiasm, even though he was rapidly proving to be a nuisance. Informing him, I'll be holding you to that claim, boy. Yes sir, he saluted in response. I won't let you down, Baka, sensei. The Junin arched an eyebrow. My name is Baki. Naruto blinked. Yeah, what did I say? Never mind. Are you ready for your first official mission? The boy's gaze expanded. Mission? Already, really? Familiarize yourself with the village, pay your respects to your Kage, and come back here to meet with your new teammates. Naruto became somewhat deflated. That's all it is? Darn, I thought I'd get some seriously big and difficult mission on my first day as a ninja to match my superior abilities or... Fine, do it all in 1 hour or I revoke your genin rank. Okay, I'll do it, he said, quickly sealing his mouth. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He was surrounded by 12 clones. Naruto started yelling orders. You three, he said, indicating a group. Scout that way. You three, that way. You three, over there, and you three, over there, go 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 go. As the remaining Naruto searched wildly for the Kage's tower, the 4 groups of clones took off in their designated directions. He pointed to the biggest building he could see and said, Where is it? Where is it? Is that it? Baki nodded, and he shot off, leaving the Junin to sigh in confusion. He still had the energy to run around like a kid and make more Kage Bunshins after everything he had been through that day. For a moment he wondered how much energy the boy would have when it counted. Baki was forced to sigh deeply once more. Overall, despite the extra challenges with Gaara, he was able to complete his own task. He had become a shinobi and won the boy's trust. All that remained was to train him and determine whether or not the plan he had devised with the Kage would succeed. In any case, he was fairly certain that before it was all over, he would have a really excruciating headache. It was a bad day for the 4th Kage. A downward spiral had begun with Baki and his Kakamemi plan with that alleged Kyuubi container, which had initially only been an annoyance. As if they hadn't already been almost exhausted, a letter from the daimyo later that morning announced that several more budget cuts were being made to the shinobi missions files. He now knew that there had been an altercation between Gaara and someone. Fight with Gaara had been a big mystery to him. Nobody got into fights with Gaara at any point. Gaara just got killed. People. It was never about fighting. He was also troubled because, given the futility of previous attempts at assassination, he hadn't bothered to try again for several months, and that was the only way incidents like this tended to surface. He was tense and sincerely hoped for a pleasant, endless vacation in a faraway place. Well, if anyone else did something to make his day even worse. At that moment, his office doors flew open. Hey, old man Kage. Tuck, 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 Thuck. Thuck. The intruder blinked in surprise as he discovered that multiple kunai had pinned him firmly to the hallway wall. Taking another kunai from his sleeve and bringing it to the boy's throat, the Kage turned and walked calmly up to the young boy. As someone at the tender age of 40, I would hardly consider myself an old man. The boy swallowed. Sorry, I guess you probably wouldn't be as old man Hokage. Ahaha, my bad. Good. Now then, who are you and why shouldn't I kill you for barging into my office like this? The boy started talking quickly. I'm Uzumaki Naruto from Konoha, only I'm not from Konoha anymore in Baki. Sensei made me a genin and told me to come see you, and here I am, so don't hurt me, I'm fragile. The boy was examined by the Yondaime. So, you're the one that Baki spoke of, are you? Naruto gave a nod. Baki. Sensei said that you, knew about my, condition? A look of shock twisted the man's face. The Yondaime's thoughts disintegrated as Naruto nodded once more. Then you really are the... Unless this boy was lying, he was looking directly at the Kyuubi Hauser, even though he would never have thought Baki's guess would be accurate. He muttered, I see, as he tried to collect his thoughts. Then, are you stable? When the unexpected question was asked, Naruto cocked his head. I guess so. You don't have problems controlling the demon's will? No, not really. I mean, there was one time before I left Konoha where he gave me some of his power, but that's about it, I think. Does the Kyuubi work with him? It might be almost too perfect if that were the case. One ninja could provide them with all the manpower they required. And perhaps he could be the one to finally purge the land of Gaara and the Shukaku, if he wasn't jinxing himself to bad luck by thinking it. A low growling sound cut through his thoughts. He looked around the room before focusing on the boy's stomach, and the boy blushed in shame. His laugh was nervous. Sorry, I haven't eaten a real meal in a while, he said. With a single wave of his hand, he removed the kunais and backed up as the boy fell forward to the ground, still considering his options. Indeed. If Baki has deemed you worthy of our cause, then so be it. You have my official blessing to train and carry out missions under the banner of Kusagakure. Now if you will excuse me, I have many pressing matters to return to. Naruto replied, yes sir, Kage. Sama, in the hopes that he wouldn't discover his mistake. He smiled with genuine joy. It had been one of the most wonderful days of his life. In addition to becoming a ninja and becoming somewhat friendly with Tamari, he was also the Kyuubi container, which neither the Kage nor his sensei objected to. It was impossible for anything in the world to ruin this day for him. His stomach rumbled once more as he turned to leave. Hey Kage. Sama. Do you know where I could find a decent ramen shop? The Yondaime frowned lightly as she turned back to face him. I'm sorry Uzumaki, but Kusagakure does not import ramen, nor do we have any shops that make it. Kankuro raised his head from his desk. He rose slowly and entered the living room, where Tamari was sleeping. Hey sis, did you hear that? Hear what? Inquired the kunoichi. That blood-curdling scream that sounded like someone whose body was getting crushed little by Gaara's sand. Tamari gave a shrug. I don't know, but Gaara's in his room by himself. Kankuro gave his chin a scratch. He said, weird. Oh well, and went back to his room. Sensei, you know I respect your decisions and everything that you've taught us in the past, but I now find myself wondering if you haven't gone senile. Your concerns for my mental well-being are duly noted and duly ignored, Kankuro, Baki said with calmness. The boy paced around the living room area in frustration, complaining, but come on. You made that guy a genin? And to top it off, you put him on our team? Tamari said, he does have a bit of a point, Baki. Sensei, as she sat on the couch. After all, genin teams are only supposed to have 3 members and a junin. And it just wouldn't be fair to make Kankuro leave just to make room for Naruto. Exactly. Nodded Kankuro. And not only that. Wait, what? What do you mean, make Kankuro leave? Tamari said, well it's obvious, as if it were written on the walls. You're the weakest link of our team. He shot back, weakest link my face paint. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're better than me. Being older doesn't mean it, she freely acknowledged. But my 97 sparring victories over you certainly do. How many times have you gotten the better of me? I've, lost count. Then you certainly can't count very high. Baki watched the exchange with annoyance, leaning back against the wall. He had never had children because of this. After teaching the two for a while, he had discovered that it was just easier to let them get their arguments out of their system because if he didn't, they wouldn't listen to anything he had to say. He felt comfortable speaking up after hearing the lull in the arguments. If we could get back to the matter at hand, please. Before turning back to his sensei, Kankuro gave his sister one last shady glance. What's up with our old man? The last time a ninja from another country came to live in Suna, he got so paranoid that he wanted the guy executed. Now he's taking this idiot nobody in as a shinobi. His fingers snapped. Just like that. The Junin said, in case you forgot, Kankuro, with a faint edge to his voice. That idiot nobody just survived a fatal encounter with your brother. Only because you bailed him out. He has also shown himself to be an expert at Kage Bunshin. Creating as many as he did all at once would require an enormous amount of chakra. I don't think I could create that many. The puppeteer simply snorted. Ah, who needs Bunshins anyway? Karasu's more reliable than that. Baki let out a sigh. He would give anything for a group of students who aren't so stubborn. He reluctantly shifted his focus to Tamari. You've been fairly quiet, Tamari. Do you have any objections to letting Uzumaki join you? Tamari gave a shrug. I don't know. I guess, as long as he doesn't slow us down or start messing things up for us, I don't really mind. Of course you don't, complained Kankuro. What more convenient way to spend time with the only guy who's ever paid you a compliment? Would you stop swinging that thing at me? Tamari leaned back on the couch once more, grimacing firmly at her fan and glaring at her brother. Sensing that he was safe for the time being, Kankuro resumed his whining. And what about Gaara? How can you expect to put that guy on our team and have Gaara be okay with it after what just happened? Baki told himself that would be the crux of the matter. I'm afraid the best we can do for that is keep Gaara calm and convince him not to try killing the boy again. Kankuro said, yeah, that'll work, while rolling his eyes. We'd have a better chance at convincing the sun to start rising in the north. If Gaara wants to kill him, you really think we're gonna be able to keep him from doing it? Keep me from killing who? Everyone stiffened and turned to face Gaara, who was now standing in the hallway. Kankuro started working diligently to remove a fictitious stain from his shirt while Tamari abruptly discovered something fascinating to gaze at on the floor. Baki sighed and walked to the center of the room after realizing he was once again stuck with the boy. Gaara, the boy from earlier, Uzumaki Naruto, is going to be training in our group from now on. Gaara didn't reveal his thoughts with his expressionless gaze. Is Kankuro leaving? Now that is not funny, shouted Kankuro, disregarding Tamari's suppressed laughter. And what makes it worse is that I'm 100% certain that he's not trying to make a joke. Nobody is leaving, Gaara, Baki replied. He will be joining the three of you as a four-person team at least until we can determine how well his abilities will be able to aid us. Can I trust you to refrain from any further attempts at killing him while he remains with us? No, you cannot, was Gaara's direct response. I'll kill him if the urge arises. If you impede me again, then I'll kill you as well. The boy's menacing tone made Baki, Tamari, and Kankuro wince. Even after hearing it for almost 6 years, they continued to be terrified. The front door opened at the exact moment when the tension in the room peaked. When Naruto rushed into the room, he exclaimed, Hey, Baka. Sensei, did I make it back in time? It hasn't been a full hour yet, has it? The others turned from Naruto to Gaara and swallowed collectively, waiting to see what would happen. Seeing that everyone had turned away from him, Naruto turned away when he saw Gaara at the other end of the room. The blonde's words were interrupted when Tamari and Kankuro both slapped their hands over his mouth. You again? Look, I don't know what your problem was with me before, but I don't want to fight you again if I don't have to. Okay. We're supposed to be on the same team now, but that won't stop me from finishing the ass kicking I was about to give. MMPH. Kankuro looked back and frantically whispered to him, Are you insane? Praying to God that Gaara wasn't going to lose it. But Gaara just stared. His glare, which was usually stoic, was slightly confused. You have seen my abilities, and you know that they are far greater than your own. Why don't you fear me? Naruto fought his way out of Gaara's sibling's grasp. He urged, Why should I? Just because you can control sand doesn't mean you're better than me. I'll figure out how to get past it, and then I'll beat you and anyone else who thinks they can stop me from achieving my goals. And you'd better believe it, or my name isn't Uzumaki Naruto. 3 out of the 5 people in the room waited anxiously in silence. Gaara's gaze remained fixed on Naruto's. You interest me, Uzumaki Naruto, he replied. He turned slowly, then started to climb the stairs back up to the roof, asking, I wonder, though, how long will it take for your foolish bravery to crumble away to terror? Soon, Uzumaki Naruto, I will paint the desert sands red with your blood. As Naruto vanished from view, he snarled, Geez, what the heck's with that guy? He only experienced a momentary pain in the back of his head before collapsing to the ground, unable to see the blow coming. Tamari appeared extremely irate at having the enormous fan torn from her grasp, and a furious Konkuro threw it back to her. The puppet master gave Baki a menacing scowl. "This is the guy you want on our team? He's going to get us all killed? Calm down, Konkuro. Calm down. How the hell do you expect me to calm down in a situation like this? Even you were 2 seconds away from jumping out the window and running for your life." Baki gave a headshake. "Listen to me, Konkuro. Naruto is not from Suna, and he knows nothing about the Shukaku. With time Naruto will grow accustomed to how things are here, until then we simply have to keep him from further provoking Gaara." With her head in her hands, Tamari collapsed onto the couch. "Baki. Sensei, I'm all for giving this kid the benefit of the doubt, but why are you and Dad so gung-ho about it? It doesn't make any sense that he would be given such acceptance so quickly by either of you." Baki scowled. "I'm afraid that is something that I cannot share with you yet, Tamari. However, there is something special in Naruto, and we believe that with the proper training, he could become even greater than Gaara." As if his skin had turned purple, the kids gazed at him. Konkuro sighed in exhaustion. "Look, Sensei, it's late and I'm way too exhausted for jokes right now. So you go ahead and do what you want with the idiot, I'm going to bed. And just remember, if Gaara goes ballistic and kills us all because of him, I'm hereby reserving the right to spend eternity in our afterlife saying, 'I told you so.'" Baki turned to face Tamari, who was staring at the unconscious boy in front of her after Konkuro left for his own room. With a very doubtful tone, she questioned, "Stronger than Gaara?" Baki gave a nod. "That's why I need your help in keeping Gaara calm around him. If we can just build up his abilities, he could soon become one of Suna's greatest assets." As Tamari tried to process everything that had transpired over the past 24 hours, another silence fell over the room. Nothing made sense anymore, not since they had discovered the boy half dead in the desert. He lifted the boy and tucked him under his arm. "I'll take the boy with me until we can find a suitable place for him," the Junin said. He turned to go, saying, "All things considered, I don't think it would be wise to leave him here. Don't forget, meet at the usual training grounds at 8 tomorrow morning." Tamari gave a nod. Now, alone, she reclined on the couch and stared up at the ceiling, wondering what more surprises her new teammate, assuming he lived that long, of course, he would have in store for her in the days ahead. Whispering, "Uzumaki Naruto." She was still unsure of what Baki and her father had noticed in him that she must have overlooked, but she made a commitment right then and there to do whatever it took to find out. Naruto's headache split when he woke up. He lay there for a few minutes, waiting for the pounding in his head to stop. When it finally did, he opened his eyes to discover that he was in a strange room. He could still see the inside of the room even though the window was open and there was no light. There wasn't much to see, really. He was lying on a tiny bed with white sheets, a small desk with a lamp beside the bed, and a small dresser in one corner next to a door that led to somewhere. Dim light filled the room as he reached over and pulled the lamp string. He glanced around the room again to make sure he hadn't missed anything, and he noticed a folded piece of paper leaning against the lamp's base. He picked it up and unfolded it, looking at the words on it. "Naruto, until further arrangements can be made, this will be your room. We will begin our first training session at the Northern Training Grounds at 8 o'clock, so if you find this before morning, I suggest you get plenty of sleep. I'm eager to see more of your abilities. More seriously, I'm telling you to stay away from Gaara as much as you can. You are to avoid talking to him, approaching him, and most importantly, provoking him when we are not training together. You must understand that you cannot hope to defeat Gaara in combat, even though I am aware of your pride as a young shinobi. Even I am incapable of doing such a thing, and infuriating Gaara further will only lead to more violence in our community. Therefore, keep a low profile when it comes to Gaara for the benefit of the village and all of its residents." Baki lost in thought. Naruto put the letter back on the desk. There were still a lot of questions he wanted to ask after such an odd day. He considered his new teammates. Despite appearing somewhat irritable, Tamari was pleasant, possibly the nicest member of the group. She had at least taken the time to learn a little bit about him, and when she found out that he was leaving Konoha, she had even shown some sympathy for him. He was certain that Konkuro was the one who had knocked him out earlier because he was a jerk. Naruto wasn't going to waste his chances of establishing himself in front of the Kage and the other members of Suna because he didn't get along with him, even though they were now teammates. He arrived at Gaara as a result. Simply put, this man was a freak. Naruto had never known anyone who could talk about killing people so easily and in such detail, especially not someone his own age. It simply wasn't organic. He recalled what Tamari had said to him in the hospital. She had mentioned identifying the telltale signs of someone who had experienced life without love, just as he had. Was it possible that she was referring to Gaara when she stated that she hadn't been discussing herself? That reminded him of their altercation that day and how the villagers had referred to Gaara as a demon and a monster. He gave a deep yawn. It would have to wait until tomorrow, after some much-needed rest, but he still had a lot of thinking to do. Another sewer. The long, narrow hallways that wound and turned in an apparently endless pattern were on one side. The creature it held, on the other hand, was obviously not able to escape through the enormous prison cell that any ordinary person could have easily slipped through. From behind the cell's bars came a pair of fiery red eyes that looked down at the boy with a hatred that seemed otherworldly. "Back again," snarled the demon. "I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore." Naruto yelled, "It's not like I'm here on purpose," at him. "I just fell asleep and now I'm here." "Well, go away. I don't like looking at you." With his arms crossed, Naruto protruded his tongue at the demon. "Make me. We're still in my body, so I'll go wherever I want." The beast remarked, "That fake haughtiness of yours is sickening." There was a loud clang and a slight rumbling as he swung one of his many tails against the cell door, but the seal remained intact. "You can't even handle that weakling Shukaku, and yet you put on an act before me because this seal keeps us apart." Naruto hesitated. "Wait, Shukaku?" With a graveled laugh, Kyuubi laughed. "It seems I've said too much. Forget I said anything." "Oh no you don't. You can't just say something like that and then not tell me what you mean. Who is Shukaku? Does he have something to do with Gaara or something?" The fox demon said nothing. It chose to speak just as Naruto was about to yell once more. "Beg me." Naruto blinked, perplexed. "What? Beg me and I'll tell you." "What? Why the hell should I have to beg you for anything?" he asked. "Because I gave you the power to defeat your enemy and escape from Konoha. If it hadn't been for me, you would have been caught and brought back to a severe punishment, but I've yet to receive any sort of thanks from you for doing it. So I'm not giving up any more freebies, mortal. If you want anything further from me, you'd better be prepared to fall to your knees and praise the mighty power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune." "Not a damn chance in hell. I don't need your help for anything, and I've never asked for it, either." As the Kyuubi looked away from the cell door, a loud grunt reverberated through the sewer. "You just remember that the next time you find yourself in over your head, which, considering it's you, shouldn't be too long from now." Naruto attempted to reply, but his surroundings started to fade. A moment later, he was staring up at his new room's ceiling once more. Now that sunlight was streaming in through the window, he sat up and squinted. Sweat drenched his face as he wiped it with his sleeve. It could be that it already felt like it was 90 degrees outside, or it could have been the dream experience he had just had. He moved to the edge of the bed and hung his legs over it, trying to reconstruct the exchange he had just had with the Kyuubi. What had he been talking about? Something or something, Shuku. Perhaps he ought to ask Tamari or Baki what it was. Abruptly, his eyes grew wide. What time was it? He leapt to his feet, checked to make sure he had all his gear and clothes, and ran out of the room. He was in a room that was not much smaller than the living room where he and the others had spent the previous evening. He looked around and saw a small clock that read 7:50 a.m. on a kitchen table. A glass of milk and a bowl of fresh fruit were seated beside it. He swiftly picked up another piece of paper that was leaning against the glass and scanned it. "I hope you have a good memorization of Suna. I'll assign Kankuro to oversee your training schedule if you arrive late." Baki. Damn. The milk was drained in an instant, and a big handful of purple berries were thrust into his mouth. He was out the door and racing off in what he hoped was the correct direction a second later. He detested the thought of what jerk Kankuro would do to him if he had the chance. "First, I'm gonna string him up to the highest branch on the tallest tree, and then cut him loose over and over until he's mastered control of his chakra climbing abilities. And then I'm gonna make him run laps around the village in the nude until he can make it all the way in less than 2 minutes." Tamari asked, "What does him being nude accomplish other than embarrassing him?" "Absolutely nothing," Kankuro replied with a smile that seemed unnaturally malevolent. "After that I'll work on his speed by having him dodge Karasu's poisoned needles with his arms and legs tied together." She told Kankuro, "You're enjoying this far too much." Gaara stood apart, busying himself with shaping spheres of sand in his hand and repeatedly crushing them. Baki was looking at his timer, which now read that it was less than an hour until 8 o'clock. He could already see the rivalry between him and Kankuro developing, and he was sure he had adequately inspired the boy. Perhaps he had overlooked something. There were 10 seconds left before an orange blur appeared on the horizon. He watched as it drew nearer until he could clearly see Naruto running for his life. When he abruptly fell forward, face first into the sand, he was only 30 meters away. That's cheating, Kankuro, Tamari said. Kankuro gave an innocent shrug. With his hand behind his back, he severed the chakra string he had concealed beneath the sand in the unlikely event that this would occur. I don't know what you mean, sis. Unfazed, Naruto leapt to his feet, dashed ahead, and almost fell in front of the others. Uzumaki Naruto. Reporting for duty, Baka, sensei. Baki then threw the timer at the boy, striking him in the forehead. I overlooked that little slip. Up once, Uzumaki. If it happens again, I'm going to believe that you're doing it on purpose. Naruto massaged his head's little lump. So did I make it? Barely, acknowledged Baki. Damn it, complained Kankuro. Now, before we go too far into actual training, I want to see a little more of your hands-on abilities, Naruto. We'll begin today with a short spar with. Naruto and Kankuro glared at one another and exclaimed, let me fight him, together. Baki said, yes, I was going to say with Kankuro, with an irritated tone. Naruto made 6 Kage Bunshins and Kankuro dismantled Karasu without even waiting for the others to leave the general area. Allow me to give you my official welcome to Suna. Allow me to introduce you to my fist. The conflict started. Naruto moaned, oof, as he found himself face down in the sand for the 3rd time in several minutes. A few yards from him, a ghastly, gangly looking puppet stood beside a laughing Kankuro. Just like I said, Kage Bunshins just can't measure up to Karasu. Naruto growled angrily and pushed himself back up. Damn it, no way in hell am I gonna lose to someone who wears make-up and plays with dolls. Gaara, Tamari, and Baki stood off to the side, observing. The first appeared as composed as ever, the second was a little bewildered and disappointed, and the third was thoughtful. The kunoichi said, he's not very good, is he, sensei? More than she asked. Baki absently rubbed his chin and grunted in agreement. To put it bluntly, Tamari was right. Although the boy was undoubtedly overly athletic, he was simply not making the most of his skills. According to all accounts, Naruto, with his Kage Bunshin, should have won this battle regardless of what Kankuro had said. There were few places for Kankuro to hide while fighting in a desolate sandy area with few trees or big stones like they were, so he was left to manipulate his puppet in the open. In this way, Naruto could have easily held Karasu at bay while he or another clone attacked Kankuro from the blind side if he had used his clones appropriately. Unfortunately, Kankuro's skill at controlling his favorite puppet was preventing the boy from approaching close enough to attack, and Naruto was merely ordering his clones to charge in unison rather than devising any such plans. Without a doubt, the boy would require work. It seems you weren't a genius shinobi just because you were the container of Kyuubi. Kankuro kept taunting, ready to give up, midget. I've barely had to move a muscle yet and you've lost all of your clones already. Naruto rubbed his face that was smudged by sand. Then I'll just make more, he exclaimed as he used his jutsu once more, causing 10 more Narutos to materialize all around him. All Kankuro did was roll his eyes. A1. Trick pony, huh? Whatever, you keep setting them up and I'll keep knocking them down. He reassured him, I've got plenty of tricks up my sleeve, take this, henge. The Narutos disappeared in a cloud of smoke, and Kankuro blinked in surprise. Henge? Henge? Tamari and Baki imitated his astonishment. Kankuro burst out laughing. What the hell good is transforming? Going. To, oh my. Ooh, Kankuro.kun. Exclaimed the group of attractive and, if you excluded the lingering smoke, nude women as they jumped at the boy. The girls had attached themselves to Kankuro's arms, legs, waist, and neck before he could even consider defending himself. They cooed suggestively, come play with us, Kankuro.kun, or so. Kankuro had no chance, as he fell to the ground in a heap of blood after a stream of blood erupted from his nose. The remaining girl changed back into Naruto, who appeared to be quite proud of himself, while the 10 clones vanished. Harem no jutsu, he told the unconscious Kankuro without explanation. Learn to fear the name, for with this technique I, Uzumaki Naruto, am invincible. Baka. Tamari yelled, using her fan to smash the gullible boy's head into the sand. After a few feeble twitches, Naruto withdrew his head. He spat sand out of his mouth and asked, what was that for? They demanded, are you trying to kill us? She gestured behind her. Look at what that stupid technique of yours did. Naruto looked over her shoulder and saw Gaara, who had a small smile on his face and a slightly inquisitive expression. He was accompanied by an unconscious Baki who was also heavily bleeding from the nose. Wow, I never would have thought that Baka sensei would have been the type. Tamari snarled and pulled Naruto back up by his jacket, saying, that's not what come here." She pulled him a few meters away until she was certain the others couldn't hear them. "What's wrong?" inquired Naruto. "Listen, Baka, when Gaara sees blood he gets excited. And when he gets excited, he gets violent. Have you already forgotten what happened the last time Gaara got violent?" When Naruto recalled Baki's warning, he became a little pale. Right, so no sexy no jutsus around Gaara. Got it. How about no sexy no jutsu, period, you pervert. I'm embarrassed just knowing that someone on the same team as me knows such a move. He whimpered, "Hey, I'm not a pervert. I just created it to defeat perverts, there's a difference. Besides, it's one of my best techniques. I've beaten every guy I've ever used it on." Tamari appeared repulsed. "Then it's about time you learn some new ones." Naruto's gaze brightened. "Are you saying you'll teach me some of your jutsus?" She gave a snort. "You wish," he pouted, "why not?" "Mainly because all of my jutsus are wind-based. You'd have to have chakra with a high wind affinity to even hope of learning any of my techniques." He objected, saying, "Well, maybe I do have a wind affinity. How do I find out whether I do or not?" She opened a small pack she had brought that morning, sighing at the boy's stubbornness. She dug through it until she found a little square of paper. "Here, take this. Hold it in your hand and focus your chakra into it." Grabbing the paper, Naruto gazed at it as if it were meant to do a trick. What's a piece of paper supposed to do? It's a special paper that determines people's chakra types. If you have a certain affinity with an element, it will have a significant effect on the paper. Just give it a try. Naruto continued to look doubtful as he shifted his attention between the girl and the paper. "Well, if you say so." When she saw the slip of paper in the boy's hand perfectly split in two, she halted her speech. "I'm going to tell you right now though, some people don't have elemental affinities, and the chances of you having a wind affinity like me are." She murmured foolishly, "Better than I would have guessed." Naruto gazed in amazement at the two pieces of paper. "Hey, it split apart. What does that mean?" She said softly, trying to conceal her annoyance at being quickly shown to be mistaken. "I guess it means we can start your jutsu training sooner than I thought." "Yada!" exclaimed the blonde, flinging his fist into the air. "New jutsu? How many are you going to teach me?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? Just because you can manipulate wind doesn't mean you'll be able to learn anything from me. I don't waste my time with low-level jutsu, you know?" "No sweat," he exclaimed with delight. "I'll master everything you have to teach me, Tamari. Nichan, I'll become the best wind jutsu user in Suna." "You think so, huh?" the kunoichi inquired, a little irritated. "Since you don't seem to already know, I already am the best wind jutsu specialist in all of Suna." "Seriously? Yep, I was taught by the best, after all." "The best?" he asked, his eyes expanding. "You mean the Kage taught you?" "Of course, he is our dad, you know?" Naruto couldn't believe it. "Why didn't you tell me that before? If he's your dad, then you could put in a good word for me when my time comes to become the new Kage." He was struck on the side of the head by Tamari. "You really do have a one-track mind, don't you?" With pride, he replied, "Only if it's something I really want. That reminds me, is it really true that there's absolutely no ramen in Suna whatsoever?" Tamari simply shook her head, more out of frustration than to answer his query. She should have been focusing on her training, but she had unknowingly become engrossed in a conversation with Naruto. Perhaps it wouldn't be so horrible to have someone nearby with whom she could truly communicate. They turned back to the others, but the two men were still unconscious and Gaara had already disappeared. "Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get any more training this morning." Naruto was wise enough to display embarrassment. After assisting in getting Baki and Kankuro back to the house to recuperate from their severe blood loss, Naruto strolled back through the village in search of lunch. As he went, he hummed to himself with joy. It was going really well today. He defeated that moron Kankuro, had his first team practice, and would be receiving special jutsu instruction from Tamari. It was nearly flawless. Something clicked in his mind, and he immediately stopped thinking. His life had apparently become a seesaw of good and bad luck ever since he had arrived in Suna. He kept having bad things happen right after good things happened to him. He had initially become somewhat friends with Tamari, Baki, and Kankuro, but Gaara had nearly killed him. After becoming a ninja, he discovered that the village where he lived had no ramen at all. Given that reasoning and how well his day was going thus far, it appeared highly likely that his luck would change. Naruto yelled, "Eat!" as he stumbled over what appeared to be a tiny dune of sand. He closed his eyes reflexively, expecting to find his face in the sand, hoping no one would notice. He was therefore a little taken aback when he felt his foot lift him upside down instead of impact. He opened his eyes to see a pair of light green eyes with thick, dark rings around them. "Whoa," he asked, what's up, Gaara?" in the hopes that things weren't as dire as they appeared. Gaara said, "That technique you used," in a somber tone. "Teach me how it works." Naruto gasped in surprise. Once he tried to speak, but he was unable to form the right words. He made the decision to try again. "What?" Gaara's expression remained fixed. "You caused Kankuro and Baki to bleed copious amounts without even touching them. All you had to do was change your appearance. I want to know how you did it." Naruto turned pale. It seemed that things had simply gotten worse than he had anticipated. I really don't think that Tamari Nichan would approve of that." "Then die," Gaara's brief reply was. Naruto screamed, wait, as he sensed the sand beginning to move up his leg from his ankle. "Let's not be too hasty about this. I mean, well, why would you want to learn sexy no jutsu anyway?" The sand did not retreat, but it also ceased spreading. "To make someone bleed as much as I like, I usually have to crush their bodies or rip them apart. Unfortunately, a person who is dead only bleeds once. It would be more enjoyable if I could make them bleed many times before I killed them." Naruto winced at the graphic pictures that those descriptions conjured up in his mind. Regretfully, Gaara's motivation for wanting to learn sexy no jutsu also seemed amusing at the time. Gaara's complete ignorance of women and the female body had to be assumed by Naruto. He wasn't going to start laughing about it, though. Gaara's statement, "You will teach me," sounded more like an order than a query. Naruto scanned his options quickly. Either certain death at the hands of Gaara, or death at the hands of a vengeful Tamari. His karma was awful, my god. "Well, you know, I can't guarantee that you'll be able to learn it, but if I show you how to do it, will you please lay off the whole killing me thing?" Gaara appeared to be thinking about the request. "If you cannot guarantee that I will learn it, then I cannot guarantee that I won't kill you." Naruto slumped. He was not going to get off any easier than that, it seemed. "Fair enough, I guess." The blonde fell onto his head as the sand spread out. The redhead called back, "Don't think that I'll forget," and walked away, leaving Naruto alone once more. Naruto brushed the sand from his hair and stood up again. The stranger he got in Suna, the stranger he became. If Tamari and Baki happened to learn of this, they would not be pleased. On the plus side, though, his recent run of luck suggests that he should soon experience some good fortune. Perhaps a traveling ramen vendor would bring that good fortune. Create hand seals. Dragon, bird, rat, bird. Concentrate on your chakra. Now put your fist down and let go. Ha! As hot gusts of wind started to swirl around his body, kicking up sheets of sand in imitation of Gaara's own, he smiled triumphantly. His smile got bigger and bigger as the winds kept getting stronger. Until he was knocked to his back in a sputtering heap by a blast of sand that shot up into his face. He sat up, brushing out his hair and spitting sand out of his mouth. Sand was rapidly turning into something he detested. "Damn, I could have sworn I had it right that time." "You're still not focusing properly." Naruto looked at his friend. "What did I do wrong this time, Tamari Nichan?" "Watch." Tamari formed the 4 seals and slammed her fist into the sand so quickly that the boy nearly missed it. The kunoichi's body was encircled by a swirling sand vortex as soon as a strong wind began to blow. For a few seconds, the sand twister let out a loud roar before subsiding. The sudden winds blew Naruto backward, and he sat up, staring at her. All he could utter was, "Wow, Fuden. Tatsumaki Shoheki." A defensive sea-level jutsu used to deflect incoming projectiles as well as scatter enemies when surrounded. The blonde placed her fan on the floor next to her and sat down in front of him. "Now, the reason why yours is still not working the way mine did is because you're still not grasping the concept of chakra manipulation to its fullest extent." Despite his blank stare, Naruto nodded. "Okay, so what do I do?" "First of all, you're gathering too much chakra required for the technique that you're trying to perform," the kunoichi said. "The proper way to do it is to put in just the right amount and then keep that amount pumping in constantly. The longer you add your chakra, the longer and more powerful the tornado will become. However, when you actually execute the jutsu, you don't release enough chakra for it to perform properly, which is why it keeps starting out so weak and slowly. However, when you continue to pump chakra into your tornado to build it up, you put too much into it at one time, which is what causes you to keep eating mouthfuls of sand. I don't know how much training you had prior to coming here, but to be completely honest, your chakra control is terrible. You've been learning chakra manipulation with Baki. Sensei, for about 3 days now. You're squandering a significant amount of your chakra resources if you focus too much of it and then only use around 1/3 of it. The wasted chakra you focused is not reusable, so once it's gone, it's gone. After that, you must take it easy until your stamina returns on its own. Are you still following me? Huh. Naruto blinked, effectively concealing his bewilderment. Luckily for you, you have more stamina stored up in you than an alpha male wolf, Tamari said, rolling her eyes. You can still make waves of shadow clones without getting tired, even if you waste a lot of chakra. Therefore, you could become one of Suna's better shinobi if you could gain a firm grasp of your control. Naruto's eyes brightened, but Tamari interrupted him, saying, I said, could become, meaning if you can actually do it. Since Kankuro isn't even utilizing any of Karasu's weapons, you've already demonstrated that you're no match for him. With a frown, Naruto said, isn't it simpler to use a large fan like you do? Compared to having to focus chakra and form a variety of seals and all that other stuff, that seems much easier. Not necessarily, it isn't, she clarified, you still need to focus chakra when using your fan, even though I don't have to form seals. In actuality, channeling your chakra into a weapon is far more difficult than simply manipulating it within your own body when performing jutsu with a weapon. You run the risk of ruining your weapon instead if you mess that up. You won't stand a chance of mastering something like this until you've mastered the fundamentals. Naruto slumped. Furthermore, you can't just go out and buy a fan like this. My grandmother made this thing, she said to him, fondly stroking the enormous fan. It was a little difficult to relate to because Naruto had no grandmother or other family to talk about, so he was unable to reply. Before the mid-afternoon heat got to be too much for either of them, they decided to call it a day. The moment passed, and soon the two were back to training. Naruto repeated the process of forming, focusing, and nearly succeeding several more times, while Tamari sat to the side, offering advice every couple of attempts. How do you tolerate this? Naruto huffed as the two walked down the sandy streets toward Tamari's home. He had rolled up his pants legs to above his knees and removed his orange jacket halfway through his training, which he was now using to wipe away the sweat that was pouring down his face. Geez, I'm sweating like a pig and you still look like a daisy. What provides? My clothing is specifically made to disperse heat and keep the wearer cool in hot weather, whereas your bulky clothing absorbs and retains all the heat that comes into contact with it. Nearly everyone in Suna wears desert clothing. Is that all? He inquired. Nope, move closer to me. What? He saw that the two were already walking fairly close to each other, so he was taken aback by the order. She held up her hand and said, Here, touch my hand. Don't get any dumb thoughts, she said. She didn't want me to have strange thoughts, so Naruto gazed at the offered appendage. His eyes widened in shock as he reluctantly reached out and placed his hand on hers. What the heck? Regaining her hand, Tamari smiled and said, I made another wind jutsu. It keeps me cool by producing a tiny breeze that moves along my skin. Although it's challenging, it's far better than some of the people here taking half a dozen cold baths every day. A girl of her age could already make her own unique jutsus, and Naruto looked at her with awe and admiration on his face. He had made a few of his own, but hers were definitely much more sensible, he supposed. It was a clever idea to come up with for life in the desert, but now that he had heard of it, he couldn't believe that no one had ever thought of something like it before. After a while, though, admiration gave way to irritation. Why didn't you teach me that jutsu first? You're keeping jutsus like that a secret while your teammate is dehydrating right next to you, he demanded. Tamari scowled at him while crossing her arms. Well, aren't you the one who isn't thankful? All you can do is whine about me taking time out of my life to teach you personal lessons is something I have never even done for my own brothers. Why even bother? As expected, Naruto became frightened and said, No, it's not that I'm ungrateful or anything, because I really am. One of the few kind things anyone has ever done for me is what you did. Really. Simply put, well, I thoughta. Before interrupting, Tamari concealed a smirk and allowed the boy to continue talking for a few more seconds. Really? Because I didn't think you deserved it now, and I had intended to teach you this jutsu after you became somewhat more accustomed to wind jutsus first. I deserve it, so don't wait, I swear not to whine anymore, please just teach it to me. Well, I may still be able to instruct you, but I am still devoting time from my personal life to this, you know. Well, what precisely will you do to reimburse me for it? Then Naruto brightened a little and said, Oh, well I could. But what exactly could he do to pay her back? He didn't have many interests or skills that weren't related to ninja work, and his life before Suna had mostly consisted of training, pranks, ramen, and not much else, really. Watching the poor boy practically pull his hair out in distress, Tamari couldn't help but smile, wondering how much longer she could drag him along before he realized her trick. Her guess would have been probably, at least for the remainder of the day. Unfortunately, she had other things to do that day. "Naruto," she said, giving the boy a quick slap on the head to get him to focus. "How about we arrange your payments later? I'm starting to get hungry." "Okay, sure." Naruto blinked at her, allowing his rambling thoughts to escape at her choice. The two walked in silence for another minute or so, each absorbed in his own thoughts, but as they got closer to the house, Naruto recalled something he had been meaning to do for days. "Tamari. Nichan, say, well, what is it?" Absently, she asked. "Are you aware of the definition of a shukaku?" The kunoichi's face instantly lost all of its color, and Naruto watched in concern. "How did you find out about that?" Quietly, she inquired. He had not anticipated her asking him that question, and what was he to say to Hera that a demon fox who resided inside his body had mentioned it in passing in a dream he had had? Very unlikely. He stabbed into the darkness and said, I heard a few villagers mentioning it yesterday." Since he was now a member of the team, he probably did deserve to know about Gaara's other self for safety and necessity reasons, but having him know could very easily complicate things between everyone. Tamari was at a loss for words. Of course, the longer he stayed in the village, the more he would hear about Shukaku, but she didn't think it would be this soon. I think it would be best to ask Baki Sensei about that," she said. "I'm sure he'd be able to tell you more than I could." "Yeah," Naruto said, scratching his head. "That's what I had intended to do, I apologize." "Don't worry about it," she said mockingly, "just, don't bring it up to anybody else until you speak with him, okay?" At least he now knew that the Kyuubi hadn't just been playing tricks on him. Judging by Tamari's reaction, this Shukaku thing was undoubtedly bad news, and he still had the uneasy suspicion that it somehow involved Gaara. Naruto nodded silently, and the two went on in a very awkward silence. The remainder of the day went smoothly, but the hours seemed to go by much too fast for Naruto's taste. Baki had never had a chance to question him about Shukaku or Gaara because he had stayed out the whole time that Naruto had been at the house, but that was when another issue arose. Even though he wasn't feeling well enough to do it, he had a sneaking suspicion that Gaara was getting impatient, and seeing the redhead crush a sand replica of Naruto during practice that morning was a pretty good indication that his time was running out. Tonight was the night he would finally have to meet up with Gaara for his jutsu training. Gaara had brought it up 3 days prior. When nightfall arrived and Baki was still somewhere, Naruto left the house and headed to his teammate's house. As he walked, a lot of negative thoughts started to fill his mind. Based on everything he already knew about Gaara, the boy could kill him the moment he arrived for holding up the training for so many days. Or Gaara might not be able to learn the technique and kill him out of annoyance. And then there was the possibility that one of the others would discover what they were doing and Tamari would rip him a new one. Baki would chastise him and likely demote him for disobeying his orders, and Kankuro, being the royal jerk that he was, would join in just for kicks. Or perhaps they would all laugh the whole thing off because they thought Gaara's learning of sexy no jutsu was hilarious. Once more. Very unlikely. He was outside the mansion-sized house before he knew it. He sighed deeply and leapt to the roof, barely landing before his body was slammed against the stairway wall and bound in a cocoon of sand. "It's just me, Gaara, so wait," he sobbed fervently. With a chilly, "I know," the boy rose from his perch on the roof's ledge and turned to face the trapped blonde. "You've been avoiding me," he said. Naruto's forehead began to perspire. "No way, buddy. I haven't deliberately avoided you or anything. I've just been, busy and all that. However, since I'm already here, how about that training?" He wasn't sure if it was a trick of the moonlight, but Gaara's glare seemed to soften a little, and then the sands retreated back into the gourd, and Naruto dropped to the ground. "Teach," Gaara ordered, quietly placing himself on the ground before him. Holding his tongue to avoid telling Gaara that people's skills were what he really needed to learn, Naruto carefully massaged his aching lower back. "Okay. Well, I guess the first thing you should know about sexy no jutsu is that it doesn't work on everybody." The only sign that Naruto should go on was Gaara's stern gaze. "You see, it's only supposed to work on men. In spite of the fact that some guys are able to resist it, I suppose it might work on some girls." "Why couldn't Baki and Kankuro resist it while I could?" Gaara asked. "Are you attracted to women?" "I don't like anyone." The poisonous remark made Naruto wince. "That's probably why, then, and since I made it, it won't work on me either." I am aware that I should not allow it to affect me. Even though he might have been mistaken, Gaara nearly seemed disappointed to hear that. Tell me how it works, Gaara said. Oh, I see. I take it you know how to henge. The Sand Nin nodded slightly. All you need to do is basically change your appearance to resemble a hot girl. The better the outcome, the less clothing she's wearing, he said. Attractive? Naruto paused, unsure of what sexy even meant. When he recalled that Gaara didn't seem to find girls attractive, he paused and said, well, then, forget about that. Sexy is just the way a girl's body looks. Women who are curvaceous and slender, with big, well, they must have, are considered sexy. Naruto felt more stupid and perverted than ever as he tried to explain this, staring into Gaara's utterly neutral face, when he suddenly had an idea. Wait here a minute, he said, and then he leapt from the roof. I'll be right back. Gaara remained motionless for roughly 3 minutes until Naruto reappeared holding something. He handed him the rolled-up magazine and said, here, look at this. Inquisitive, Gaara took the item and slowly started turning the pages, learning more as he went. He mumbled, so this is the image that I need to imitate, with more self-talk than Naruto. Yes, you should have no issues if you just make your henge appear as close to them as possible. Gaara flipped the magazine to the side. Do women often do such things to each other while bathing? Skip that part, urgently, Naruto said. Gaara let the magazine fall. I will try now. Naruto swallowed. Good luck. Ignoring him, Gaara made the appropriate hand seal. Then he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Expectantly, Naruto watched to see what would happen. The outcome could very well mean the difference between his life and death. Soon after, the smoke had mostly dissipated, allowing Naruto to confront Tamari. However, the remainder of the face and, if he had to guess, that body unquestionably belonged to his female teammate. Or at least, a red-headed Tamari with tiny black rings around her eyes. The boy had no choice but to faint when confronted with this new insight. The blonde was staring up at a restored Gaara when consciousness returned. He said, I thought you told me this technique didn't affect you, but he didn't appear particularly upset. Thanking his lucky stars that he hadn't bled nearly as much as he had anticipated, Naruto sat up and shook the cobwebs from his head. He said angrily, that's only because I wasn't expecting you to turn into your sister. You instructed me to change into a woman, Gaara said calmly. Tamari is a woman. That's not, he said haltingly. At this point, he doubted he would ever be able to look like Tamari again without blushing. He whispered the last part. You're not supposed to turn into someone you actually know. That just makes it weird, and could also get me killed in a heartbeat. He began to sound irritated as he asked, then what is the right way to do it? He told him, just do like I do, in an attempt to soothe him before he became angry. I just tried to imagine what I might look like as a girl and transformed into that. After a long moment of silence, Gaara reached down and picked up the abandoned magazine. Where did you get this? The blonde's expression changed to one of guilt. Damn it. Where is it? Exclaimed Kankuro. The puppet ninja stood in the center of his room, which appeared to have been hit by a hurricane. He hurried to the back of his closet and threw things out carelessly after frantically removing the mattress from his bed. I know it was here last night. Damn, where did I put it? A voice from the doorway asked, lose something? No. Go away. Tamari scowled before turning and leaving. Whatever. As Kankuro kept looking, a terrible idea struck him. Tamari. What if she was playing with him and had already discovered it? She would never let him get over that. For heaven's sake. It had to be here. As he attempted to appear innocent, Naruto replied, I just found it lying around somewhere. Gaara gave him a quick glance before turning back to the magazine. I will keep it for further study until I perfect this technique then. Naruto gave a snort. That comment, if it had come from anyone but Gaara, would have sounded extremely perverted. Well, good luck with that, then. You will meet me here again tomorrow. Huh? But I've already shown you. Until I have perfected the technique, you will continue to assist me, or I will kill you. Naruto shuddered. Well, when you put it that way. Without saying anything more, Gaara turned away and repositioned himself on the roof's ledge, looking up at the moon. After a few more seconds of staring, Naruto leapt from the roof and started walking back to Baki's. A deep snarl escaped Gaara's throat as he abruptly clutched his head back on the roof. Squinting his eyes open, he muttered, yes, I agree, as he looked down at the disappearing Naruto's form. There is something different about him. What do we do about it? There was silence for a moment, as if the boy was waiting for something. Then he smiled. Yes, perhaps you're right. Naruto.kun. The surroundings appeared somewhat blurry, making it difficult for Naruto to pinpoint his exact location. What he could see was that Tamari was standing in front of him, grinning suggestively. He started to respond, but he was unable to come up with any appropriate words. Naruto.kun. The light purple dress she usually wore just melted off her body, leaving the blonde girl in front of him completely nude. When he tried to look away in shock to avoid getting another nosebleed, he discovered that she was always directly in front of him. Naruto. They now numbered in the hundreds. He couldn't even muster the strength to squeeze his eyes shut to block out the images, one after the other, still staring at him expectantly. Naruto. The smoke that had previously surrounded their bodies had turned to sand, and they all had red hair now. Uzumaki. A sinister glower replaced the seductive smile as each red-headed Tamari poofed into a Gaara one by one. Like enormous snakes, the sand that was whirling around them developed fangs and began to twist. Then he noticed that none of the Gaaras had changed their clothes. Uzumaki. Then all of a sudden he was sitting up in his bed. His body was sweating, his heart was pounding, and his mind was jumbled with pictures that had been bothering him only moments before. He muttered, "Kami," as he ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I think I've created a monster. I'd take my dreamtime conversations with Kyuubi any day if it meant no more dreams like that one." A furious Baki was standing in the doorway when his door blew off its hinges. It seemed to Naruto that he had been waiting there for some time. "You sleep like a log, Uzumaki, but nap time is over now," he said. "The Kage has summoned us. We have a mission." "Mission? Really?" The dream abruptly vanished from memory. He said impatiently, "Yes, now get up and let's go. Tamari is already waiting for us there." "What about Gaara and Kankuro? They won't be coming. Now stop asking questions." Jumping out of bed, Naruto said, "Yes sir," and started getting dressed. Then he realized something and stopped. He looked at Baki oddly. "Hey sensei." "What, Naruto? Did you call me Naruto.kun a minute ago?" In agonizing silence, the two gazed at one another. "I'm going to forget you ever asked me that question, Uzumaki. And I'll thank you now to never suggest it again." Air. Right. The desert, how he detested it. His skin suffered greatly from the scorching heat. He was extremely uncomfortable even with the long gray cloak and sun hat covering his entire body. If it were not so crucial to his cause, he wouldn't even be here right now, but he would be making it a point to never return. At any rate, not unless he had the impulse to demolish the place. As he approached the front gates of the vast village, he was swiftly stopped by two Junin guards. Insisted, "State your name and business here," one of them. Instead of responding, he just raised his hat and let the men see his face. Surprised, the guard who had spoken gulped. "Oh, it's you, sir. Please forgive my rudeness. Kage. Sama is awaiting you. Please, go ahead." With a sly smile, the man lowered his hat and proceeded into the village. Tamari hushed to the boy. "Would you stop fidgeting around, Naruto?" "I can't help it," he replied in a giddy whisper. "This will be my first real mission as a ninja and I'm excited." They both snapped to attention as the Kage cleared his throat loudly. Darkly, "Are you through?" he inquired. Both of them gave stiff nods. "Good. Now then, we received a letter from the Land of Rain this morning. It appears that they have been having several conflicts with the Grass Country in the past few months, and currently sit on the verge of an all-out war. Specifics have not been given to us yet, but both sides are apparently looking to solve their feud without the need for further violence. However, every time a meeting is held to discuss peace, more problems arise between them. So the leader of Amegakure has asked that we send a few reinforcements to aid them in the event that a battle does break out." Naruto grew more and more excited. This seemed to be becoming a very significant mission for them. He looked at Tamari to see how she was responding, but she continued to stare directly at her father. Naruto also turned around after catching the hint. "Baki, you and your team will go to Amegakure as backup. Follow whatever orders their leader might give, but remember, you are not to instigate an attack against anyone from Kusagakure unless it has become clear that fighting is unavoidable. This is essentially meant to be a peace mission. Is that clear?" All three gave a nod. "Good, in that case, Uzumaki and Tamari, you are both dismissed. Baki, I need to speak with you for a minute." Baki turned to the children after bowing his head to the Kage. "You two go inform Gaara and Kankuro of our mission. I will meet up with you all at the village gates in 1 hour." Shouting, "Right." Naruto pumped his fist in the air. "Yes sensei," Tamari said, giving Baki and her father a little salute. Baki turned back to the Kage as the two genin departed the room. Sir? I'm expecting an important guest in just a moment, but before he gets here, there's something else that we need to discuss. This is gonna be so cool. Please tell me you won't be this hyper all the way to AIM. Naruto asked, aren't you excited about it too, Tamari, Nichan? Not really, she acknowledged. I've done this sort of thing before, and it wasn't that big. Well, I haven't, he gleefully interrupted. My first real mission, and it involves stopping a war. And all this time I was afraid that my first mission was gonna be something lame like catching somebody's runaway cat or weeding someone's garden or something like that. Tamari winced as she recalled her first mission, which, regrettably, had involved collecting fragrant herbs for an elderly woman who enjoyed using them in her baths. It was definitely a dark period in her career. Naruto recalled her memories and asked, so what's Amegakure like, Tamari, Nichan? I've only been there once before, but from what I've seen the place is made up mostly of rainforest or jungle. Like areas. As you might guess, it gets more annual rainfall than anywhere else in the world, and even when it's not raining it's still ridiculously cool and humid. In short, almost an exact opposite of Suna. As they turned a corner, Naruto was about to say something about that, but he was stopped when he almost ran into someone. His words caught in his throat as he looked up to apologize to the person, but he was able to stop himself just in time. The man in front of him was studying him, and he was studying him. As if his skin hadn't been exposed to sunlight for years, his face was ghostly pale. He could see long, black hair beneath his wide, brimmed hat. He glanced up and down at Naruto, his thin mouth twisted into an inquisitive smirk. There was a hint of danger in his eyes, which were narrow slits of bright yellow. Naruto concluded that the man looked like a big snake. He also concluded that he wasn't someone he would want to associate with based solely on his appearance. Once again, the man's gaze swept over Naruto with interest. Then he just walked right by him, tipping his hat slightly. Please excuse me, he said softly. But I'm in a bit of a hurry. Naruto shivered and turned to face Tamari as he disappeared. What kind of creepy guy was that? That's not somebody that you want to get yourself involved with, Naruto, she reassured him. He's been sending a lot of letters and envoys to father for months now, but I've never found out what they were about. All I can guess is that he's hoping for some sort of alliance with him. Naruto questioned, so who is he? The only things I know for sure are that he's the leader of Hokage from the land of rice fields. His name is. The Kage said, ah, Orochimaru, in greeting. A pleasure to finally meet you again after such a long time. Orochimaru answered, believe me, Kage. Sama, the pleasure is all mine, and at last took off his hat. Baki bowed and walked out of the room without saying anything more after the Kage took a moment to wave him away. I trust that your trip here went well. The pallid man replied, as well as can be expected, though I do admit that this sandy wasteland atmosphere isn't exactly pleasant for me. Perhaps next time we can arrange for you to meet with me in Otto. I think you would enjoy it. Perhaps, was his curt reply. But I know you didn't travel all this way out here just to discuss the weather. Orochimaru smiled. Before we get down to business, a question, if I may? Kage gave him a wary look. Go ahead. I happened upon a young boy on my way here. A blond boy in an orange suit with whisker marks on his face. Might I trouble you for his name? Unaware of the snake Sanin's intentions, the Yondaime maintained an expressionless expression. Uzumaki Naruto. A newly ranked genin of mediocre talent. Why do you ask? Orochimaru shook his head, his smile growing. No reason, sir. Just being my nosy self. Now then, what say we get down to the real matter at hand? At the same time, in Konoha. And that is the situation, Sarutobi said, turning to face the four individuals gathered in front of his desk. The Land of Grass has sent a request for extra manpower from us in the event of an upcoming battle with Amegakure. You four will travel to Kusagakure and lend support to their cause, but they have made it clear that they would like this conflict solved without having to resort to violence if at all possible. Is that clear? The group's Junin moved forward, striking what he thought was a masculine pose. Yosh. This mission is in good hands, Hokage. Sama. My young, lovable students and I shall show the Shinobi and Kusa and aim the burning fires of our youth. They will see the errors of their ways and be sent down the path to peace and prosperity. One of the boys behind him, who resembled the taller man exactly, flexed his arm. He exclaimed, Guy. Sensei is so cool. Watching him in action fills my spirit with the flames of springtime and my body with the passions of youth. Lee. Exclaimed Guy. Guy. Sensei. The two men embraced each other tightly. In the background, One could practically hear the waves breaking under the lowering sun. The second boy and the girl who were observing them looked away in shame. "Yosha!" Guy exclaimed, letting go of Lee. "Let us be off, my students. If we leave now, we can make Kusa in exactly 3 days." In response, Lee said, "No, Guy. Sensei, I believe we can get there in only 2 days." As the pair fled the room, the girl yelled, "Don't say stupid things like that. After them. You'll only encourage him." After observing his teammates leave the room, the other boy sighed and quietly followed suit. As the team departed, Sarutobi gave a small smile. Although Kusa didn't ask for assistance very often, he was confident that Guy and his pupils could manage the matter. After all, what could possibly go wrong for Kusa and AIM in a peace treaty like this? Seemingly preoccupied with his work, the Kage flipped absently through a few files that strewn all over his desk. On the inside, though, he wasn't thinking about paperwork. His mind kept going back to the discussion he'd had with Orochimaru the previous day and the plan he'd suggested to him. Naturally, the Kage was never one to put his trust in others, regardless of the situation, and he was constantly reminded by his innermost thoughts that Orochimaru was never someone to be trusted. Imagine seeking to conceal his scheme to destroy Konoha by using the approaching Chunin exams as a pretext. Was he unaware that Suna was now bound by a treaty with them? If Suna were to violate that treaty in this manner, how would the rest of the shinobi world view them? No one else would ever trust them again. On the contrary, all of the fabled Sanin's statements seemed to make perfect sense. That idiot daimyo's refusal to use Suna's own shinobi for missions was the reason Suna was currently having trouble. He persisted in deferring work to Konoha in order to save money. However, the daimyo would have no choice but to depend on Konoha if he disappeared. Furthermore, it wasn't as if Konoha had ever benefited Suna in any way, even with this treaty of theirs. Furthermore, Suna would emerge as the most powerful village in the entire land with Konoha out of the way and Orochimaru and Hokage at his side. With the kind of manpower they both had, no other nation would dare stand in front of them. With a sigh, he combed through his short hair. Other than the few clues about Gaara, Orochimaru had been vague about the nature of this invasion. Gaara was almost unstoppable, but he didn't think his son and a few more soldiers could so easily overthrow the best shinobi village in the country. He scowled. The Snake Sanin's scheme had to be more complex. However, what? He was brought back to the present by a jarring knock on his office door. "What is it?" He growled out loud. A voice said, "Lord Kage. Sama," from behind the closed door. "A messenger from Konoha has just arrived, requesting an audience with you." He squinted his eyes. The timing was a bit too convenient for him, but he wasn't one to believe in such ridiculous notions as twisted irony or karma. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Show him in." A man in his 20s entered as the doors opened. It was clear from the sour expression on his face that the man thought his time here was being wasted. Before he spoke, he lowered himself in a dignified bow. "Forgive the unannounced intrusion, Kage. Sama," he said. "But I have come to you today by the will of Lord Hokage. Sama." The Kage curtly replied, "I assumed as much, not feeling particularly inclined to perform formalities at the moment. And what is so urgent that Sarutobi Dono would seek out my assistance?" The man sighed, as if the act of forming words itself were weighing him down. "Several days ago, a young boy ran off from our village. 1. Uzumaki Naruto. The boy has been a great nuisance upon our village for many years now, has no family and is not a qualified shinobi, but Hokage. Sama has taken to looking after the boy for some time. I have been sent here today to ask if you might have any information on the boy or possibly on his whereabouts." The Yondaime listened, grateful that he could always be totally emotionless, because this was not at all what he had anticipated. "It seems a rather strange request to seek out help from neighboring lands to help search so thoroughly for a person whom you claim is nothing but a nuisance," he said. The shinobi reassured him, "Under normal circumstances, you would be all too correct, sir, but this boy holds a certain sentimental value to our Hokage. Sama. Furthermore, the night that he escaped, he attempted to steal a very valuable object from the village. He is to stand trial for theft and possible treason against Konoha if he is found." The Kage concealed a grin. The man in front of him was obviously lying, or at the very least, not telling the whole truth. He sounded as though he had been reading from a script, and everyone in Konoha was aware of the Kyuubi's presence within him, as he already knew from Naruto. It makes sense why the ninja appeared to be reluctant to be present. Unless the Hokage specifically ordered it, he would never try to bring the demon child back to their village. He had thought that nobody in Konoha, let alone the Sandaime himself, had any affection for the boy, so that did cause some confusion. Knowing that there was currently no other option available to him, he suppressed a little sigh. "Forgive me," he said, "but I know of no one by the name Uzumaki Naruto." When he heard that statement, the man actually smiled with relief and got up to go. "I see. In that case, I apologize for wasting your time, Kage. Sama. I will take my leave now." As the man left the room, the Kage nearly burst out laughing. He hated the poor boy, no doubt. Hadn't even bothered to describe Naruto's appearance before giving up so quickly. It was understandable why Naruto left if that was how everyone in Konoha felt about him. He was unaware that his own son endured the same kind of suffering in his own village. The grin returned to his face. Now, however, it made no difference. They didn't deserve to have him back if they were stupid enough to let something so potentially helpful pass them by. He was also presented with a plethora of new options for the impending invasion. That is, assuming the boy didn't mind a little revenge. Naruto had learned something fascinating about desert life in the short 2 weeks that he had been residing in Suna. The place could get extremely cold at night, regardless of how hot it got during the day. Nevertheless, the mild chills that came every few minutes were a pleasant diversion from the daily dehydration he had been experiencing. The new climate, friendly clothing also made a difference. As he was getting ready to depart, he recalled Tamari discussing the unique attire made for desert travel and made the decision to get some for himself. As luck would have it, though, he had hardly enough money for one of the pricey outfits at the store. Surprisingly, he had discovered an outfit that resembled his typical orange suit almost exactly, but it was too small for him. At last, he had a new black mesh undershirt, a blue and orange shirt, and a pair of light blue pants. The outfit's softness and lightness were truly remarkable. If only it were slightly more orange. The blonde had a great view of the surroundings because he was perched on a big dune. Unfortunately, the only thing to look at was sand, which became monotonous after the first 11 or 12 seconds. Aside from his team's small campground, he turned his focus to the sky and lowered his head back into his folded hands. Counting stars might be a bit more engaging than counting sand grains. Perhaps. The open desert at night had another pleasant quality. There was nothing at all to block out the night sky or distract from it, unlike Konoha. It was truly a breathtaking sight. Still awake, huh? Naruto craned his neck and saw Tamari kneeling a foot or so behind him. "Nah," he replied, grinning broadly, "I'm just too excited." Tamari laughed and shifted so that she was sitting next to him instead of behind him. "I guess nobody on the team plans to sleep tonight." Naruto looked around the camp slowly. Standing a few meters away, Gaara gazed into the desert as if she were a motionless statue. Through the thin lining of his tent, Kankuro's silhouette was visible, tinkering with Karasu. Baki was sitting next to the little fire that had been constructed, lost in thought and gazing into the dancing flames. Naruto said, "Baki, Sensei's been kind of distant since we left, hasn't he?" Tamari gave a nod of agreement. "Yeah, he's barely said a word since we left Suna. Usually he'd be going over missions briefing or something." Naruto speculated, "Maybe he's just nervous? I'll bet it's not every day that you get a mission to stop a war like this." Tamari gave a shrug. Baki had been doing this kind of thing for years, so she knew that wasn't the cause. She didn't really care, though, because she didn't know why. Naruto said, "We'll be in aim tomorrow, won't we?" Tamari gave a nod. "Yep. Getting anxious." "Yeah," he acknowledged. "My first real chance to show what I can do. I wonder if I'll get to fight someone." "You'd better hope not. This is a peace mission, remember?" Then he pouted, "I know, but I really want to show off my new techniques that you've been teaching me." Tamari gave an eye roll. "You know, most shinobi don't go around showing off their techniques to others." "Well, I'm not most shinobi," Naruto said affirmatively. At that, Tamari had to smile. "That, you certainly aren't." Naruto gave a small laugh, and then there was quiet. He looked up at the night sky once more, and Tamari lowered herself to her back to follow suit. Neither blonde spoke because they didn't feel compelled to. Naruto found comfort in the knowledge that there was someone who didn't mind being in his presence in this way. Since her brothers and sensei were the only people Tamari ever really spent time with, spending time alone was the norm. Baki was the same way unless he was giving instructions, and Gaara never spoke until someone prompted him to do so, sometimes not even then. She was always the target of Kankuro's sarcastic or snide remarks, which would result in a brief argument that never lasted very long. She didn't really care, though. Tamari had always been quick to criticize genuine comfort in silence. Being able to have a conversation with someone without feeling awkward was one thing. but being able to sit in silence with someone without feeling uncomfortable or like you need to find something to talk about was a sign of genuine peace with whoever you were with. When she looked at Naruto, he appeared to be just as calm as she was. She grinned. Tamari was starting to realize that Naruto wasn't really that ugly, for whatever reason, whether it was the moonlight, the odd cat-like marks on his cheeks, or the fact that he was finally beginning to shed some of the barely concealed pain that had been slipping across his face far too frequently since she had first met him. His face was still a little softer and more innocent, but he was certainly not ugly. My goodness, I'm not that alone. She pondered. After all, he's 2 years younger than me. She reminded herself of that, but it was still clear that the boy's past had done a great job of making him mature earlier than he should have. Similar to Gaara. The same face that portrayed a loud, mouthed, immature child could also resemble Gaara a little too much before he had destroyed all of his feelings. She was aware that Naruto had been despised in Konoha for unclear reasons, but in contrast to Gaara, Naruto still appeared to be concerned about other people and their opinions of him. That was the reason he continued to seek acceptance from others instead of isolating himself like her brother did. Tamari was staring at Naruto out of the corner of his eye when he decided to turn his head slightly at that precise moment. He said, "What's wrong?" Tamari turned her face away before the blush showed on her face, realizing that she had been caught staring, even if accidentally. A vague, "Oh, I just, nothing," she muttered. "Oh," he remarked nonchalantly. He looked at the girl more closely and said, "I thought maybe I had something on my face. Hey, are you okay? Your face looks red. You don't have heat stroke or something, do you?" As Tamari saw Naruto reach out to touch her forehead, her blush deepened. She swiftly took his hand in her own while attempting to maintain as casual a distance as she could. "Of course not. I live in the desert, I never get heat stroke." He said, "Okay, that's good then," but his scowl grew. "But you do look a little red, you sure you're?" "Yes, I'm fine. Really," she said, growing frustrated at her inability to control her unexpected outburst of emotion. What the devil caused her to lose her will? Furthermore, why in the world did Naruto have to stare at her in that manner? "Nay, Tamari. Ni-chan?" she asked, still unable to look into his face. "What? Can I have my hand back?" Tamari looked down in horror to find that she was still holding the boy's hand tightly. She immediately leapt to her feet after dropping it like a poisonous snake. "Well, I'm off to bed now. We have a big day tomorrow, so I suggest you do the same. Good night." "Good." Before he could say another word, she was gone. "Night? Well, that was weird." He pondered whether he had offended her with his words. However, he hadn't actually spoken until he saw her staring at him. He smiled lopsidedly. Perhaps she was staring at him because she found him attractive. He gave a bitter laugh. Yes, that day would come. As if a girl with Tamari's intelligence, talent, and beauty would ever. Did he say, beautiful? Now that I think about it, she was certainly attractive and had a killer physique. Ah, damn it. Naruto bowed his head and swore as softly as he could. Now I'm thinking weird things about Tamari. Ni-chan. Stupid Gaara and his stupid jutsu. He sighed in disappointment. Furthermore, even though she was kind, intelligent, and a very skilled shinobi, it wasn't like he actually knew her that well, even though she was just as attractive as any other girl he had ever really known, including Sakura. If there was any genuine attraction to her that hadn't been sparked by sort of seeing her nude, even if it wasn't her, he knew that the only other explanation was that she was the only girl his age who didn't treat him like a diseased rat and seemed to enjoy being around him. He was positive that he would feel the same way about Tamari if any other girl ever behaved in that manner around him. Naturally, the only reason Tamari didn't treat him the same as the others was because she was still unaware of his secret. The only exceptions might have been Baki and the Kage, but if Tamari or any of the others found out that he harbored a bloodthirsty demon, well. This was discouraging. He stood up slowly and walked back to his tent, hoping that the comfort of sleep would help him forget his troubles. All he needed to do was clear his mind of Tamari and return it to the mission. Naruto's night was filled with numerous visions of a young, blonde kunoichi and evil demon foxes, but regrettably, it was nearly impossible to control your own dreams. To the dismay of both Naruto and Kankuro, the team was on the go before the sun rose. They were approaching the desert's edge after nearly 2 days of travel, and Baki had told them that they could reach Aim before dawn if they made good time. Tamari found the next 2 hours to be rather challenging. Having to travel with a grumpy Naruto and Kankuro, a brooding Baki, and a normal Gaara was definitely taxing on the nerves for the lone true morning person in the group. Shortly after, the desert was abandoned and a sizable forest was revealed. The group started to notice a steady increase in raindrops as the sun started to rise above the horizon. Although he immediately wished he had brought an umbrella, Naruto didn't mind because it only took him 2 minutes to get completely soaked. He looked around at the others. Kankuro had pulled out a big rain hat over his black hood and kept his head down, while Tamari was using her enormous fan as a makeshift umbrella. Naruto smirked weakly, assuming he didn't want his makeup to run. While Gaara created a little roof of sand above him, Baki continued to walk unfazed, though Naruto couldn't help but notice the slight strain on the redhead's face as he moved. He shifted beside Tamari, intrigued. He muttered, "What's up with Gaara?" Tamari gave her brother a nervous look in return, but she relaxed a little in comprehension. Gaara doesn't like water. When his sand gets wet, it becomes harder for him to manipulate. He'll probably be grumpy for the rest of the day, so better give him his space. Naruto said, "Gotcha," nodding. When Tamari realized that Naruto was still approaching her so closely that their arms were rubbing against each other as they moved, they took a few more steps. She was a little flustered after the entire ordeal from the previous night, even though she felt it shouldn't have been such a big deal. "Nah, Naruto?" she asked, scolding herself in her head for being so foolish as to stutter. "What are you doing?" He inquired, "What do you mean?" "I mean that you seem to be moving rather close to me, don't you think?" After blinking, Naruto smiled sheepishly at her. "Oh, well it's dry under here. I didn't think you'd mind." Tamari's face went cold. She had no idea what she had been anticipating, but she felt stupid for anticipating it at all. Tamari disliked feeling stupid, particularly not twice in a single day by the same individual. She shoved the boy a little and watched with some satisfaction as he slipped on the damp ground and fell into a shallow puddle of muddy water on his butt. Naruto jumped back up and gave the kunoichi a fierce look. He demanded, "What the heck was that for?" Tamari simply gave him a sly smile and stuck her tongue out before turning to leave, content that justice had been done. Naruto stopped glaring. "Damn," whispered he. "Now my new clothes are muddy. At least the rain'll clean 'em, I guess." With a sigh, he pondered whether Tamari was the only woman who was difficult to understand. He hoped not. God. It is 9 in the morning. Discovered the lead shinobi of AIM welcoming team Baki into his small building. And the whole time it had rained. As long as he stayed as far away from Tamari as possible, Naruto was able to finally get her to let him back under her fan after about 20 minutes of whimpering, begging, and bribery. This allowed him to dry off before he met with the AIM representatives. A man and woman, both with long black hair and appearing to be in their mid-20s, welcomed them as they entered the gates. Both wore dark gray cloaks over greenish brown pants and carried broad, black umbrellas over their heads. There was a weapon visible dangling from each of their waists, a kodachi from the man's, from a kusarigama of the woman. The Junin said, "Greetings, I am Baki," after being silent for several hours. "My team and I have come in accordance with your leader to assist you in your conflict with Kusagakure." "Well met," she said, bowing slightly. "This," she said, pointing to the man beside her. "My name is Yamane Kasumi. Is my brother, Kazuya. We welcome you to AIM and are very—" The man, Kazuya, interrupted, "I trust that there will be more of you coming?" The Suna nin were taken aback by the man's savage tone. "I'm afraid not," declared Baki. "We are all that have been sent." Kazuya gave a disgusted snort. He turned to leave without even acknowledging the glares he received from Naruto, Kankuro, and Tamari. How typical of one of the Big Five, the strongest nations in the world, but when a lesser country asks for help with a war, they send in a Junin and 4 children. "Brother," said Kasumi firmly. Naruto yelled, "Hey," and stepped forward. "So what if we're kids? Our team can handle anything." Kazuya stopped in the middle of his stride and abruptly threw his umbrella into the air. Yorozu. Hari no aim. When the umbrella opened at the top of its ascent and started to shoot hundreds of long, thin needles in his direction, Naruto's eyes grew wide. He made a set of seals and slammed his fist into the ground, thinking faster than he had ever thought. Tatsumaki Shoheki. Immediately, a slight wind blew up around him. It was sufficient to keep the needles away from him, though it was not nearly as vicious as the ones Tamari had performed. His triumphant smile was short-lived, though, as Kazuya used the sheath of his sword to blow right through the little twister and crack him between the eyes. He fell heavily onto his back at his teammate's feet. Kazuya snorted once more and gave the fallen boy a stern look. He turned and walked back into the village after saying, "A word of advice, Greenhorn. Someone as weak as you shouldn't have such a big mouth. It could get you killed one day." Rubbing his head and glaring daggers at the man's back, Naruto slowly sat up. Tamari knelt beside him and looked at his head. "You okay?" "Yeah," he replied absently. More painful than the blow to his head had been the blow to his pride. "Pardon my brother's behavior," Kasumi said, bowing once more. "I'm afraid he's been under a lot of stress in the last few weeks." "Apologies are not necessary," Baki responded coolly. Kasumi gave a nod. "Then if you will please follow me, we will brief you on your mission at Lord Masamori Sama's mansion." When Naruto sensed Baki's hand on his shoulder, the group started to follow the girl. Softly, "Uzumaki," he said. "I realize that this is your first mission, but you cannot provoke the people who employ us." On the defensive, Naruto retorted, "But he's the one who started it, you heard him, he doesn't think we're good enough." "That may be the case, but we are still here to do their bidding. As long as this mission continues, we are their tools, and they are allowed to treat and implement us as they see fit. That is the life of a shinobi." Naruto scowled in silence. He still didn't like it, but he did recall hearing something similar in Iruka Sensei's classes. Yeah, well, even if we are just tools to them, we're still humans, too. They should at least treat us like we are. Baki walked to catch up with the others after shaking his head. "You've still got a lot to learn, Uzumaki." When Kazuya noticed a slight sting in his arm, he was halfway back to the mansion. He reached up to rub it absently with his left hand, but was startled to find it sticky with blood when he pulled it away. A 2-inch long, shallow cut just below his shoulder was visible when he tugged at his sleeve. With a question in his voice, "What is this? That greenhorn's jutsu wasn't strong enough to cut me, and I know he never touched me himself. But I didn't see any of his teammates move either. Who the hell wounded me then?" After a few more seconds of staring at the cut, he saw his sister and the Suna ninja coming up behind him. He scowled and crept on, not looking again at any of them. Team Guy had reached Kusa at the same time as the Suna team had reached AIM. Tenten exclaimed, "This place is beautiful," as they looked around at the grounds they were passing, which were covered in tall grasses and vibrantly colored flowers. "Yosh! This land is most certainly enjoying its own springtime of youth, is it not, Guy, Sensei?" "Indeed it is, Lee. And what say you, Neji? Doesn't the brilliant sight make you want to shout out in joy of being alive?" "Meh," the prodigy said with a neutral grunt. The group moved through the bustling village until they reached the village leader's manor. It was the biggest structure in the village, though it was nothing in comparison to the Hokage's tower. They were greeted at the door by an old man using a long oak walking stick to support himself while wearing heavy gray robes. He said, "Welcome friends, welcome," with a smile. "So you are the lot who have come to assist us, are you?" "Yes," Guy said. "My youthful students and I have come to bring peace back to the lands of Kusa and AIM." "Wonderful, Takara. Sama will be most pleased, I'm sure. I am Halleck, minister and advisor to Takara. Sama. If you would follow me, I will take you to him." He escorted them into the manor, where a balding, portly man dressed in royal purple robes welcomed them. Halleck took a seat beside the man and lowered himself gradually into a sitting position. "Gentlemen and lady, I present to you the daimyo of Kusagakure, Shigata Takara. Takara. Sama, these are the shinobi of Konoha that you requested." A deep belly laugh was given by the daimyo. "Excellent, I've been anxiously awaiting your arrival since yesterday. I felt for sure that you wouldn't make it here in time, but it seems I've worried for nothing, doesn't it?" He continued to laugh. "Please my guests, make yourselves comfortable. I would love to offer up a banquet for all of you, but I'm afraid our time is quite limited, so we really must get down to business. Perhaps something to drink, though." He gave a loud clap of his hands without waiting for an answer. "Mina, Chan, some refreshment for our guests." "Yes sir," a voice exclaimed from a different room. The words, "Such a good girl, she is," were spoken with affection. "Now then, have a seat and we can begin." Under her breath, Tenten muttered, "He's a lively one, isn't he?" Lee concurred, saying, "He is full of the passion of youth." "Right then," said the big man. When he noticed that Neji had stood while everyone else had sat, he paused and scowled. "Something wrong, boy?" Neji glared accusingly at the Kusa men while crossing his arms. "Sorry sir, I just find it difficult to relax when there are so many armed men hiding in the same room as I." Halleck's and Takara's eyes grew wide. The daimyo gave a small laugh. "You're quite the observant one, aren't you, Sonny? Well, if you already know they're here, I suppose they might as well come out and say, hi." Immediately, 3 shinobi emerged from behind the big pillars beside Takara, and 2 more fell from the ceiling's corners. They all started to encircle the Konoha team while holding kunai in their hands. Lee and Tenten sprang to their feet. The kunoichi duly remarked, "Wow, betrayed before we even get started, that's a first." "Attack!" exclaimed Takara. That's exactly what the 5 shinobi did. Lee kicked the first hard, sending him into the far end wall before he had a chance to strike. The second one to attack the boy in spandex was able to swing his weapon twice before an uppercut sent him crashing into the ceiling. Simultaneously, Neji was skillfully dodging the ferocious swings and stabs of 2 additional assailants before thrusting a palm enhanced with chakra into one of their chests and then into the others, causing them to both groan in agony on the ground. Tenten was the target of the last assailant, but she deflected each blow he threw at her. When the girl flipped up and behind him, giving him a hard kick to the back, the man retreated for a full powered stab and ended up with nothing but air. She caught a handful of her own kunai as he staggered to the ground and pinned him to it with a flick of her wrists. It took precisely 8 seconds to complete the exchange. Guy grinned with pride at his team's performance, as I would expect from my young children. In shock, Takara and Halleck turned to face their fallen soldiers. However, Takara's second burst of raucous laughter dispelled the 3 genins' ire as they returned their focus to them. "Brilliant!" he exclaimed joyfully. "Splendid, superb. I knew that calling on Konoha for help was the best choice." Tenten scratched the side of her head, perplexed. "Anyo. Please forgive me, my friends," Halleck said, "but that was just to test your abilities. When I saw how young you 3 were, I thought the Hokage had gone mad, sending a group of hatchlings on a mission to prevent a war. But you've all shown that you're very capable of assisting our cause. Of course, those men that you fought were only genin, like yourselves, but I didn't expect them to fall so quickly. It seems their instructors are going to have to work them harder if they hope to succeed in the Chunin exams. I hope there are no ill feelings for the trickery?" The 3 genin appeared unsure. They looked at Guy to find out his thoughts. After a few moments of deep contemplation, the Junin showed them his trademark. "Nice. Guy pose." For Lee, that was sufficient. If Guy Sensei still trusts them, then I shall trust them as well. Tenten and Neji were not as convinced, but since it would be futile to argue now, they chose to follow their teammates. However, Neji continued to use his Byakugan. After everyone had taken their seats, Kasumi said, "Allow us to explain the situation that we're now facing." Everyone was seated at a small table in the middle of the medium-sized kusal room, with the exception of Kazuya. Instead, the aim nin leaned against the wall and stood in the corner of the room, barely glancing at anyone. Kankuro held up his hand and said, "Pardon me, shouldn't someone else be here for this?" When the aim siblings looked at one another, Kazuya appeared to comprehend first. "Masamori, Sama." Kasumi gave a nod of approval. "Masamori. Sama is incapacitated at the moment. The 2 of us have been assigned to brief you of your mission in his stead." Kankuro appeared to be satisfied by that, and he settled in and relaxed. "Now," the kunoichi said once more. "This whole problem started exactly 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago a few of my men, who were stationed in a small village along the border between us and Amegakure, came back to me with important news," Takara clarified. Team Guy members knelt before him once more and listened carefully, but they were still ready for any additional tests that might come up. Apparently, they had overheard an old man running around the village claiming to have discovered gold a few miles to the south of them. The men went to see for themselves, and after some searching, found the area that the man had described. They dug for a while, and ended up returning with close to a pound of pure gold. By their calculations, the vein of gold in that area could easily stretch for miles in all directions. Naturally, we immediately sent out workers to begin excavating it, but we ran into a problema. By the time our men got to the site to begin their digging, they found men from Kusa trying to do the same. Baki let out an inward sigh. He already knew what this was preparing him for. The gold was discovered almost exactly on the boundary line between AIM and Kusa. Fighting quickly broke out between the 2 sides, and we've been at a standoff over it since then, Kasumi went on. "So this is all a big squabble over who should rightfully have the gold?" Kankuro inquired. Kazuya scoffed. "It's not some measly little squabble," said. "It's a serious matter, though I wouldn't expect any of you to understand that." "Brother," Kasumi said, glaring at him. Kazuya merely huffed and said nothing. The girl said, "He is right, though," and turned back to the group. "That gold is very important to the land of Emiya." Halleck told them, "The land of Kusa has been in a slump as of late," continuing where the daimyo had left off. "Our main sources of income come from shinobi jobs and exporting vegetation to the lands of Suna, Iwa and even Kumo." However, missions have been few and far between in the last few months, and a longer than average winter season has put a hampering on our crops this year. Takara, if we had this gold, she added, we wouldn't have to worry about any further money problems for a very long time. However, it would seem that AIM desires it just as much as we. Lee remarked, if that is the case, then could you not simply split the gold with AIM? Surely there is enough that could keep both of your countries in high financial support? Takara laughed. Yes, we thought so too, and at first we believed that AIM would be willing to compromise as well, Buddha. We arranged a peace meeting to discuss how we would divide the gold 2 weeks ago. There was a lot of tension, and we knew that Kusa didn't trust us to keep our word. Their daimyo, Shigata Takara, didn't even come to the negotiations. After some initial bickering, we eventually believed that we had come to an official agreement, but then things started going wrong. Like what? Asked Naruto. Kazuya said, like one of their representatives suddenly dying, in a sour voice. The blonde boy exclaimed, what? Yes, Kasumi said in agreement. Halfway through the meeting, one of the Kusa men suddenly began coughing blood, and fell over dead just seconds later. Tamari questioned, was it some sort of assassination? No, not by any of our men, at least. But as you can imagine, Kusa believed otherwise. They called off all talks of peace and were ready to fight us for possession of the gold. Masamori Sama did all he could to regain their trust, sending them peace offerings every day for the next 5 days. Kusa eventually relented, and agreed to meet again for more talk. We met again 1 week after the first. I had already been fearful of an attack on my life before, so I stayed behind once again, but sent several of our most talented shinobi along with our mediators to ensure that another tragedy didn't happen. Did it? Inquired Neji. In a sense, yes, said the daimyo. But this time it was the Amegakure leader Masamori who was suddenly stricken with a sickness. Sickness? Asked Lee again. Maybe, though the general thought at the time was poison. AIM accused us of seeking vengeance for what happened the week before, though I can assure you, just as I assured them, that none of my men had anything to do with it. Halleck was there himself, and he's my right hand man. He never would have allowed anything so reckless to happen during such a delicate time. The elderly, wise man nodded in agreement. Masamori looked completely fine when he first showed up at the meeting, but shortly after arriving, I noticed he started to grow pale. His breathing became labored and he finally collapsed. So did Masamori-san. With a, no, luckily, Kazuya interrupted Tamari. He's still alive, but he has yet to recover from the incident. Our medic. Nins and doctors spent hours examining him, but found no traces of poison or even any sort of virus or disease in Masamori-sama's body. They finally concluded that he had merely collapsed due to a buildup of stress. We gave our apologies to Kusa for our accusations, and we have both agreed to give one more chance to a treaty. Halleck stated, and that is where we sit right now. Today will be our 3rd meeting with AIM, and that is the reason that you have been hired. Tenton speculated, you want us to oversee the meeting with you? Correct, said the elderly man. We still can't rule out the possibility that this is all a big scheme by AIM to get all the gold for themselves. Unfortunately, there's also the possibility that there is another outside party who also knows about the treasure, and is using these meetings as a way to stir up dissension between our 2 countries for their own gain. Therefore, while this meeting is going on, we will need you 4 to be vigilant. You will be responsible for spotting anything even remotely suspicious that could lead to another assassination attempt. If this meeting doesn't go as planned, there will be no further peace talks, and we will have no choice but to use force against AIM. Guy exclaimed, Yash! Fear not, Takara. Sama, with great excitement. My bright, youthful students and I shall see to it that no war will befall your beautiful country, and if we fail, then we shall all run 1,000 laps around your village. Tenton complained, don't make promises for us. Takara chuckled once more. Well, I don't believe something so strenuous will be necessary, but I'm most thankful that we have your support. Halleck got back to his feet, swaying a little on his cane. We leave for the border in 2 hours. Please use this time to prepare yourselves. After leaving the room, Team Baki went outside to discover that the rain had finally stopped. It was Konkuro who spoke first. So basically, the only reason we're really here is to be watchdogs. Correct, expressed Baki. But there's something more to this mission than what we've been told. Tamari questioned, you think that they're keeping something from us? Yes, though I don't know what it might be. Konkuro went on, you know, it might be the work of another nation. Both sides get attacked, war breaks out, whoever it is comes in and sweeps the whole place clean in the end. Baki hummed quietly. He turned to his teammates, who still had not shared their thoughts. Gaara wouldn't, he knew, but Naruto. When the boy heard his name, his head jerked up. Uzumaki? Anything to add? Naruto appeared to be lost in thought as he rubbed his chin. All I know for sure is that Kazuya guy is a jerk and I'd love to punch him in the face. I don't trust him at all. Baki gave an eye roll. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was something he might have anticipated from Naruto. He warned them, don't wander far, because we're going to be leaving soon. We can't afford mistakes in this mission. Those kids look like they could be a problem. I'm not worried. Perhaps you should be. Who knows what the consequences could be if they did something to screw this up? Yes, you don't have to remind me. I'm well aware of how delicate this is. Just stay on guard, give warning to the men, and be prepared to deal with them when the time comes. Of course.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.